Hello, everybody. Can you hear everything okay? Season's greetings and all that. Let's see, trying to get the questions larger. Scrolling up to the top of the chat. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully the rest of the world's not quite in the freeze zone that we are here in America. It's been really especially cold the past 2 days, and I hope everyone is warm and safe and happy out there. I'm trying a little bit different setup today, so I'm looking more at you guys while I'm reading the questions. It may not be the most flattering for my face. On the note of poor weather, Memphis is doing rolling blackouts today. So at any moment, this could all go away. I don't have any control of that. It's supposed to be 30 minutes, but it's turning into 3 hours for most people. So I'm going to get to everyone's questions in a little bit. Frosty, Ontario. I'm sure you're used to it up there, but cold Florida. That's the thing. Cold Florida, cold, really cold Memphis. It was 3 degrees here the other day with a wind chill of -15, which is just about as miserable as it ever gets here. And it's one thing if you're way up there in the north where people are built for that and the houses are built for that and everyone's got coats and everyone's got snow tires and stuff. But, Florida, Memphis, the cities don't even own snowplows. So it can be pretty crippling. And a lot of the poor families here, their houses are not insulated well. And I know it's if all that happens to us is we lose a live stream, we'll be fine. But my heart goes out to everyone who's really been affected by this. Before we get to people's questions, I was getting set up for this, and I grabbed one of my acoustics, and I grabbed my little tuner, the little Polytune clip-on, which is about as good as the clip-on tuners seem to get. And I got the guitar perfectly in tune according to this, and then I played some chords, and they were all a little bit sour. So I then sweetened it by ear, and now it plays really nicely in all keys. But it's interesting. I've been reading guitar magazines all my life, and now with all the internet forums, and that's something I never see anyone talk about. People never talk about sweetening the tuning beyond what an electronic tuner gives you. Some of the better ones have some tempered tunings in them. The full Polytune does. I'm not sure what this is calibrated at. And no one ever talks about how to use a metronome. Not that people are usually wanting to get into using a metronome or anything that makes you a better player that requires a lot of hard boring work. But setting it to only go on beats 2 and 4, so setting it to half the tempo and still practicing that way. Not that I am these days a great example of that. I have been in the past much better at that. But so much of the really important stuff just doesn't get discussed out there. And everyone's talking about what strings to use, or what pickups to use, or what amp, what pedal will magically transform your playing. And knowing how to tune and knowing how to use a metronome for best practice, that will make you a much better player than anything else you can buy. It's the intent and the time. And for a great example of that, the Vox video yesterday with Steve Selvage, he was playing my 335, not even his, though I set his up and I set mine up pretty much the same. So it's fairly interchangeable. But he was on someone else's guitar playing a relatively inexpensive current production amp with a few very basic, simple tweaks, and it sounded really good. Um, Two things about that. It's the player, because I don't sound like that through that amp. I'm a fairly good guitarist. I used to be a good guitarist. I had hand issues. Steve does this professionally. It's just a totally different tier. Number two, I was watching Super Danger Studios video this morning comparing the Ruby uh, 63, whatever it is, that not the Dream, but the Universal Audio Ruby pedal to the Strymon Meridian, seeing which one got a better Vox sound. And they both sounded like a lot of recordings of Voxes we all hear, but they don't sound like a real Vox. They don't do all the things that a Vox does. And that video showed that as well. All right. So now I'm going to see what the responses to my yapping here are. Hey, Chris Santmere, thank you for joining us. Or is it Santmere? Santmire? I guess you can't tell me here. Yeah, you're in Charleston, Travis. I love Charleston. Yeah, but no salt, no plows. We have sand on some of the bridges here. That's about it. T says my metronome is a bass and drum sequencer. Anything like that, as long as you use it. And it's great to be able to, I could call up drum loops in Logic, played by real players, and have a little bit of feel, but working on that consistency. If I wasn't doing this all the time, I would be a much better player. YBA 75 YBA is happy with this Korg Pitch Black. I've used those; they're quite good. The Gap Gluck. Bill Bach says, "Happy holidays." Thank you, you too, Bill, and happy holidays to everyone. Gap Gluck is a fantastic metronome app, great for drummers. Good to know. Gap Click, that makes more sense. That makes a lot more sense. Richard Nagamitsu grew up with a pitchfork and a metronome. There's a lot to be said for that. I used to play violin when I was very young, and the pitchfork was what you had. It's funny. Most of the time, I can tune a guitar to within a few very small cents just by remembering what the first note of Rubber Soul is in my mind, and it's this. Haven't played too long. I haven't played in too long, so just pants myself in public. But just my memory of listening to that record. You put the needle on, the first thing you hear is A. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. But can you tune a fish? Ba-dum-bum-tsh. Andy K, solid state is not necessarily garbage. Let me go up to the top and try to catch some of these questions and do like speed responses. I don't want anyone to feel ignored. Clyde Broadway has a Vox CC2 with Wharfdales. The power cuts in and out. Normal channel not working. In your opinion, is it worth it to take to a tech and upgrade speakers with a possible $500 to $600 bill? The CC2, if the power cuts in and out, and normal channel is not working, the power failure in that amp is pretty rare. The normal channel might just be a bad tube or bad pot. Most of the stuff in that amp is pretty simple to repair. As far as the speakers, yeah, it's absolutely worth it to get something better, and something better does not necessarily have to be that expensive. But you could also, if you got the Vox for 400 2 years ago, Top hats aren't all that. Most of the AC30 clones on the market are either not very good or they're very expensive. There's not a lot of overlap there. I would say find a good tech. Your CC2 probably has some very minor things wrong with it. And then there are lots of great choices that sound better than Wharfdale's. Um, that's a whole other video. But there's a lot of videos of boxes and fenders on my channel being played through a multitude of speakers, ranging from about $300 each to about $50 each. David Hawkins, he took his advice on the Hot Rod Deluxe. He's booked in for the new year for filter caps and all the 5-watt low voltage stuff. He's getting a 12 AT7 and V3, a 5751 and V1, and putting a P12N speaker into it. Be a very transformed amp. I think you'll be very happy with it. Gringo Pig says, all I want for Christmas is a two-rock. Well, if you can get it down the chimney, go for it, Santa. I don't dislike the two rocks. I just find that while they're good amps, there's an awful lot of marketing that makes people perceive them as much better amps. I've talked about this in the past that it used to be the baseline for a good amp was, say, a twin reverb. I'm talking pre-1981 twin reverb. The baseline for a good amp has gone way down, so that, all right, here, I'm trying to do this so you can see it. If this is current production Marshall and Fender, and all of a sudden you get say a Dr. Z or a Two Rock, oh my God, those are so much better. But the baseline used to be here. So a modern Two Rock is about the same as a well-maintained pre-81 Fender of comparable wattage. So, there's nothing wrong with having one. If you buy one and you like it, it's a fine choice. I just think that for what you get, the expectation is a little overinflated. But once people buy such things, they hear magical properties because it is expensive. Remember, again, that video I did yesterday with Steve. You can buy an AC15 C1 with the greenback used for under $500. Pretty much any tech could do the things in that video that I mentioned fairly inexpensively, $150. It's a good amp. Is a Two Rock better? A little bit, but there's a huge price gap there for that incremental increase in quality. Christopher Hallisey says he's moving to the East Coast for a few months, looking for a nice option to use while I'm there, living in a small house with a few roommates. Last night I was playing around with the low latency mode of Logic Pro in my MacBook. And for practice, if you're looking for a quiet practice amp, most of the stuff you can do with your laptop these days is really amazing. If you have a Mac, you can do GarageBand. You don't have to have a Logic. I think there's a GarageBand equivalent. There are various GarageBand equivalents on the PC as well. I just came from Windows up to about 9 months ago, and there are lots of free and inexpensive DAW systems that have guitar effect and modeling plugins. So if your question is for low true practice and you just want to have, I've got distortion and delay, and I'll put on some headphones or listen through the laptop or some small speakers, that can make more sense than buying a small amp just for a short period of time. Edward Kowalski says it's negative 26 Celsius where he is. I think that's the 8th level of hell. All right. Lenny's Brown Tooth says, "Hey Lyle, do you have any opinion on Marshall Studio 15?" Yeah, they're okay. I find that there's a fizziness to them that I don't much care for, but They're better than a lot of the current production low wattage Marshalls today, but I think there are probably better options than that, unless you already have one, in which case it can be kept going for years. Music Nerd says, have you had an opportunity to check out a Synergy amp head? Um, I have not. I should call Bruce and see if they have any floating out for review, but I have not. There are a lot of really good and or at least very interesting apps out there that I have not had the opportunity to work on. I think primarily because there are a relatively not that many in existence, and they tend to be in certain markets. And Memphis is not typically in the hotbed boutique area the way LA or New York or San Francisco or Seattle might be. Um, so, either that or they're all just out there and they're bulletproof and they never come to attack. But I think it's more likely that there just aren't that many out there, and the ones that are not here. Nick Serra says he has a 68 Trainer YVM1PA that sounds great but it has 4 input channels and was wondering if I had any simple ideas for mods for a channel like changing a cap resistor value, etc. Thanks. Well, Nick, I don't think I've worked on that model, but I've had other similar PA models from other amps where they have 4 channels. And a lot of times they're just mixing a lot of channels together. And when you do a mixer like that, if you have 2 channels, each channel has less gain than it otherwise would. If you have 4 channels, each channel has a lot less gain than it otherwise would. So sometimes you can just say, these are the 4 mix resistors. I'm going to lift these 2, just use these 2 channels. And those 2 channels then have Marshall gain. Yeah. That's the easiest thing to do. If you like the sound, but just wish it had more, just say, all right, I'm going to just lift 2 of these mix resistors, just have 2 channels, and those 2 channels will be powerful. That is general advice without seeing the YVM1 schematic. I can't be more specific than that. Sorry. Joachim Yonker says, hi, Lyle. Great to see and hear you at Christmas Eve. Thank you. Question, do you have customers whose amp needs power amp tubes, but they like used ones because they're used to used tubes in sound and feel? I've had a few guys with notions like that, and I'm usually able to talk them out of it. Um, a used tube isn't may last 10 years or 10 minutes. There's just no way of knowing, and there's just no benefit to it. Um, if you get new tubes, you have a certain time frame. If you have a problem, you return them to the vendor, you get them swapped out, and you know that they're a known quantity. Old tubes don't intrinsically have magic properties. Now, you may find that an old set of Amperex or Mullard or RCA, whatever, has a sound that current production does not, though it's very subjective. But I would be more prone to using new old stock than using old stock. I talk customers out of a lot of notions, and the customers who don't want to listen to my advice, I advise to find a different tech because I don't want to do a bunch of work on an app and put in tubes that I don't trust, and then they fail and they assume that I did something wrong. So. Rockin' Chair Boogie says, greetings from the boot heel of Missouri. I just drove through your neck of the woods the other day, coming back from way upstate. Had to drive from Keokuk, Iowa, back down to Memphis. Went through the entire state of Missouri, north to south, including the beloved boot heel. Merry Christmas, and I wanted to know, do you work on anything besides tube amps? I have some Apogee Rosetta 800 and needs new ADAT jacks. I typically focus on musical instrument amplifiers, the majority of which are tube, some of which are solid state, though I try to wean out the ones that aren't worth repair. And that's not me being, high and mighty. That's me saying it's not worth spending your money on this. ADAT repair is something that I have not done. It's something that I could do, but I'm sure there is someone in St. Louis who does that as well, who might specialize more in that area aspect of electronics than I do. I could do it, but I have not done that particular work before. Andy K says, Lyle, are there any solid state power transistors that are better as a valve replacement? Anticipating tubes becoming unobtainable in the next 2 years. Well, there's a lot of things going on to answer that. First of all, it's not a matter of just a power transistor. There are a lot of advances in output technology for solid state. The Class D stuff can do an awful lot of power at a very low price. Now, there's a trade-off there in that a lot of the Class D stuff is really cheap and it fails if you look at it too hard. But there is good Class D stuff, and if the market is there for it, it can get better and better. It's not so much that you would be designing a better transistor so much as people will be doing stuff ahead of that to model the response of a power tube, in that you might monitor the output current of that solid state circuit and then adjust the signal going into it to compress, to have a dynamic change, even introducing intermodulation or harmonic distortion. That stuff can be done, is being done in the modeling sense. But that's stuff where you would really just be changing the signal being fed to the power transistor by different amounts depending on what the level hitting that transistor is. All that said, I really don't think that we're 2 years away from not having tubes. A huge factory just opened up in China, making the Pisvane stuff that Tube Amp Doctors is using, and the Shuagang factory is supposedly coming back. Now, both of these things are in China, and they're having terrible COVID woes right now. Hence the um, distribution issues that still affect the world, and that could lead to a, not to make this a science or politics channel, and it's a shame that the two have become intertwined in the past couple of years, but the lack of control of the COVID crisis in China means that a new variant could arise that could affect the rest of us. So there's no promises that we'll have tubes in 2 years, and there's no promise that I'll be here to complain about it in 2 years. But hopefully, Merry Christmas, everybody. Hopefully, we don't all die, and then we'll have tubes. And Slovakia, the JJ plant, has also been affected by COVID, but they're still in business. And if Russia ever decides to join the rest of the world and the century, we'll have all the new sensor stuff back, the tongue saws, the Sovtex, et cetera, et cetera. So that's about all I can say on that. Chris Santmeyer asked a question. 68 Custom Princeton is having buzz sounds on low notes. Just got back from the tech with a new set of tubes and rectifier, and it persists. Any ideas? Is that got the? I think that's got the Celestion G10 or the 10A. They're calling it. That speaker is terrible, and if it has JJ 6v6s, even brand new ones, they can become very microphonic in combos. I no longer will use a JJ in a combo, and I think I think it's a G10. That speaker, I've had a lot of failures in that speaker. They're just awful. So I would try a different speaker. Or, well, first of all, if they have JJs, take it back from the tech and say, "Hey, these JJs aren't working out. Let's change them out for the Tube Amp Doctor red bass or the electro harmonics, depending on which one you can get." They're both much better than the JJ. They both take fairly high plate voltage. That's not really an issue in a Princeton, and they're both less prone to microphonics in a combo. But also try a different speaker. Lefty Mike, any experience with the Marshall Class 5 amp? Yeah, I've got a lot of experience with it. Uh, in stock form, it was horrible. It could be made better, but it's just built so poorly, and the sounds are not great no matter what you do. I don't see any need for that amp. Ronald Adams is asking what a good bias target for a cathode bias amp, in his case, a matchless 15 style amp. Basically, you want to be running between 100% and maybe 115%. So an EL84 is a 12-watt tube. So you want them to idle at 12 to, let's say, 14 watts per tube. Ideally, it would be 12 to 13 and a half watts per tube at 120 volts coming out of the wall, not the 19 that you often find in a matchless. Christopher Marsteller says, just picked up a 65 Thomas organ Vox with tubes. Any opinion? It was upgraded with a 12-inch vintage G12. Some of the Thomas organ amps are really good. Is that the Cambridge or Cambridge Reverb that you got? They're not at all the JMI British Vox circuit. Most of the Thomas organ ones are much closer to a Princeton or a Deluxe Reverb than they are to an AC30, but they can be really good sounding amps. Martin Reed says, Happy Christmas from Edinburgh. You too, Martin. Thank you for joining us. I learned with a tuning fork, and I'm lucky enough to have very relative perfect pitch. Good. I used to have much better relative pitch back when I was studying music theory and composition and doing the ear training classes every morning. It's still, I think, pretty damn good. Though I botched because I was trying to remember muscle memory as opposed to the pitch relative thing on when I did the. I've just seen a face bit earlier, but um, yeah, relative pitch is a skill that you can develop, but you have to keep working at it. So my interval recognition is nowhere near as good as it was in my early 20s when I was in that world every day for multiple hours every day. I can still hear a song and say, oh, that sounds like it's in G, or that sounds like it's in A, or that's a song in D. And it's not just the guitar parts. And I'm not really saying, oh, I recognize those notes. I recognize the feel of it. There's certain keys have a certain emotional weight, and I don't want to get all new agey or crystal magic about it, but I can recognize certain keys. And it's interesting to me. I know this is wide ranging, but hey, it's my coffee and our time. Um, it's interesting to me how different keys have entirely different weights to them, emotional reactions. To me, for just simple things like G minor is a very soothing minor key. F sharp minor to me has a lot of tension to it. I hear F sharp minor and I hear G minor, all is well. And it's not just the resonance of the instrument because I've got that one strat tuned to E flat, and if I play G minor on that, it's tense. I play a flat minor on that, which is really G minor. It's like, oh, there it is. Maybe that's just me, but I've met a lot of other musicians who have similar feelings. Paul Coert says, "What's the best way to contact you for some projects?" Email, but I'm still playing catch up on email. It takes a long. I'm one guy, and I get so many emails. I'm going to be opening up for new work after the first of the year. Saint Meyer. Okay, thank you, Chris. Mike Ortiz asks, "Have you ever worked on Reverend Hellhounds?" I have not. Sorry, I've had two for a fuse now, and they are tired now. Um, I would suggest taking them to a tech, but I don't have any familiarity with that model. Tired is usually tubes. It could be tubes um, and something else changing in the amp, but usually it's just tubes wear out. RevZone says, I have a Crate Stealth GT50 two-channel amp, gets hot and one channel shuts down. Get it repaired or dump it. I don't know what the resale value of that crate is. Um, it could be something very simple. Um, if it sounds like it's a solid state amp, the solid state amps have what's called a thermal paste, which keeps the output transformers in really good thermal contact with the heat sinks. And over time, that thermal compound, that white silicone stuff, dries out and becomes less effective, at which point sometimes the transistors get too hot. And a lot of solid state amps have a sensor that says, hey, if this transistor gets over X temperature, shut down until it cools back off. So sometimes you can take an inexpensive amp and just reapply new thermal compound and bang on, it's brand new. Sometimes you have that is at fault. Sometimes that sensor becomes faulty. Other times your output, your filter caps begin to fail, though it's less of a problem on solid state because voltages are usually much lower. And then that can draw more current and cause things to run hot. So it could be expensive, it could be cheap. I would not spend more than $150 getting that repaired. And if the amp's only worth 99 on the market, not even that, unless you're qualified to do it yourself, you open it up one night on the kitchen table and say, yeah, man, that white stuff is just turned to a powder. Let me get some thermal grease. Used to be you could go to Radio Shack, replace all that, screw it all down, and see if it fixes it. But don't do anything more than just a Hail Mary like that. Acoustical butt nugget. All right, you got the username winner for the day. Acoustical butt nugget. I'm glad your butt nugget did not go electric. Hey, Lyle, I was wondering with these freezing temps, how bad it is on apps that aren't being used. They should be fine. Uh, the tubes are in vacuums. The tubes don't care how cold it is. The rest of the components, if in terms of just letting the amp sit there, they don't care. If you use it, there are two things. First of all, initially, components will be cold, and especially capacitors have a operating range, maybe -20 to plus 105, maybe 20 to 105. So pretty much if you're not going to die from freezing to death instantly, neither is the capacitor, but it may not sound its best for the first 15 minutes till it warms up. The real thing you have to worry about is condensation. So if you have an amp being stored in a garage and it's 10 degrees outside and that amp's at 10 degrees, you bring it into a house that has warm, humid air, you can have condensation on the inside of the amp. You power it on, there's water there, you could get a short. So I would say if you have an amp that cold and you bring it into a warm house, let it sit 24 hours before you power it on. It's probably uh, that's probably as extreme a precaution as you need to take. Lion Circle says he's learned so much from this channel. Thank you. Well, thank you for watching and thank you for the kind words. Jim Cox says tube bass amp, any you'd specifically avoid? Well, yeah. Anything that says Mesa, anything, uh, any SVT, unless you're bordering on independently wealthy, it takes so much to maintain them. If you can justify it professionally, Hutch Hutchison, I saw him playing with Bonnie Raitt. He had an SVT. He's a phenomenal player, and he's playing at a certain professional level, and that sound is justified. And the sound guy is going to make sure that every night his SVT sounds great in front of house. And he's touring the world with Bonnie Raitt. So if they need to get all new, $600 worth of new KT66, not KT66s, sorry, 6550s, that's just a touring cost, whatever. They do it. If you have to pay $800 to retube a SVT to go play a couple of club dates in town, so you know, if you're recording at home, just get a super reverb or a twin reverb and use it for bass as well, or old Fender Bassman. It's great. But for gig levels, I wouldn't use tubes anymore. I honestly wouldn't. There's the Aguilar uh, Class D amps for like 500-600 bucks for 3 to 500 watts, and they really sound good. And most of the time you go see a big stage show, they may have amps up there, but the front of house is just being fed a signal from an Avalon U5, which is, so there's their sound. K. Michael P. says it's hard to beat the new Bad Cat amps for the money. Well, I hope they've improved because all the old Bad Cat amps I've had in have been some hot garbage inside. But no one believes that, so I don't want to keep arguing about that. Dustin Thiessen says, you seem to be knowledgeable about box stuff. Well, thank you. What can you tell me about the valve version of the pacemaker? Found one in a secondhand store for 700 bucks. Had to fly home, or I may have purchased. It's not worth 700 bucks. Pacemaker's a cheap little practice amp. Um, again, unpopular opinion, best practice amp in the world. Second best, sit on the couch with your electric unplugged. There's I already mentioned the fact that today the same box that you use to type these questions can also be a practice amp. I've also shown in multiple videos that you can get a deluxe reverb, a Princeton reverb, an AC-15. Just keep the volume low. It sounds great for home practice use, and then you can actually gig with it as opposed to a little thing that won't hang with the drummer. And the pacemaker is just not a very good amp. I'm sorry, but I'm glad you dodged it. Clyde Broadway, could you give a few questions you should ask when using a new tech for the first time? Oh man, that's a tough one. I would. Thank you, Andy K. I'll read the question. I've got the current on my iPad, so I can see if the live stream cuts out because of any issues, and I'm reading the main one in as I answer them. I would look for word of mouth. I would talk to other musicians who've used them because in any business, when you're asking someone to tell you about themselves or to promote themselves, most people, even a con man, can get through that. Talk to guys who've used them. Say, are you happy with the service? Have the amps worked? Did you feel communication was good? Et cetera, et cetera. I would go for word of mouth rather than asking the tech themselves. That's a tough one too, because a lot of the stuff that techs might use to kind of sum up each other to, oh, okay, he's good, or oh, he's got some work to do, or she's awesome. You have to know the game so well. I don't think that those questions would necessarily occur or have meaning to the player, but asking existing customers is the way to go. Dustin Thiessen, I think you dodged a bullet. Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. And same to you, Curtis Everett. Andy K uses his HX Stomp XL with Boss Waza Airless for quiet home practice. It's amazing. Yeah, the HX Stomps and the Helix and all these things, or just getting a Katana and using the headphone out. There are a lot of great options these days. But I still think this is the way to go. Highly recommend them if it's all within your means. They're so choice. Nick Sarah, says Lyle, I love the channel. This is such a great public service. So thanks again. Can you explain how to find which side the outside foil is on a capacitor that isn't labeled, like orange drop, for example? Yeah, this is pretty simple to do. What you want to do, well, give me just a second. Let's see if I can make this happen on here. Take an output jack and drop it in your coffee cup. Let's, I'll fish that out in a minute. The next intermission. That's one way to get the flex off that. All right, take a jack like this or any other jack you got. Hook a guitar cable into it. Get some alligator clips. Alligator clips attached to the positive and the negative. You can look up how to find that on a jack. Clip the other end of those alligator clips to either side, to each side of a film cap that you're testing. So you got the positive to one side, the negative to the other. It helps if one's red and one's black. Typically red's positive. You plug that cable into an amp or anything that lets you hear what you're doing. So you will have basically this connected to the positive and this connected to the negative. It's plugged into an amplifier and you can hear that. Then what you do is you take an AC cable. It can be the cable of the amplifier that you're using, just a standard power cable that has power going through it, and you put it across near the capacitor, touching at a right angle or in parallel, just, so that cable's right here. And you listen, and it's going to be, you're going to hear a little bit of a noise when you bring that AC power close to that capacitor. Then you reverse the hot and the negative and the positive on the cap, and you repeat that. And whichever way was quieter, whichever way had the least noise from the AC cable being close to this cap, that means that you have the outer foil end connected to ground, the negative. And so you can just take a pen or a marker or whatever and put a little dot there and say that's the outer foil end. It works on an orange drop. Not all caps have an outer foil. Not all orange drops. There are many different caps that are sold as orange drops. So some caps, there's not going to be any difference, in which case there's not an outer foil. This Mallory 150 does have one. Most capacitors that you use for coupling caps and amps, film caps, do have an outer foil. That's how you find it. You don't have to use a scope. You don't have to use anything difficult. You have to have an amp, a spare jack. Some alligator clips are really handy because you don't want to touch these yourself because that will inject noise just touching it. And that's how you do it. You can set up a box to do it. People will do whole setups for this, but that's all you need. So, and just remember, I'm the guy who will drink coffee with an input jack in it just for you. Richard Namagatsu says, have you ever checked out a Marshall Code? I think it has some usable tones, but I like it with my head rush. I have not. Sorry. I've seen them in the store, but I've never tried one. William Bach says, I hear magical properties in every amp I build. The actual good or bad properties are audible only after a couple of weeks. Yeah, that's the thing. You love all your kids, even the ones you have to visit in prison. Noah Rocks. Hey, Lyle, looking forward to coming up next week with a couple of amps for you. All right, cool. I'll look for your email. Marshall's this time. An Origin 50, a DSL 2000, and maybe a vintage solid state lead 100 to look over. We'll talk. DSL 2000s can be really problematic amps. Hopefully it's one of the last board revisions and you won't have the drifting bias issue. I'd love to meet you if nothing else, especially next week because this week is crazy. But Origin 50 is fixable. DSL 2000, hopefully it's fixable. Hopefully it's not a candidate for an all-new board. And I'll be glad to look at the vintage solid state lead 100. We'll need to look at the reverb completed listings, see what the value on those things is. Jim's Home Studio says, can buttons be contact cleaned similar to pots? You mean the switches behind the buttons? Yeah, typically the switch will have a little opening in it. You just squirt some cleaner in there and switch it back and forth a few times. I did that on the, I had a DSL 100H and I had a JVM 205C last week, both of which got that treatment. Edward Kowalski says, question, kits apps, could I hire you to destupefy a kit app schematic prior to building it? By the way, you rock. Thank you very much. Uh, Usually schematics aren't too stupid, though I'd be glad to take a look at it. It's usually the kit layouts that are dumb. But yeah, shoot me an email. I'll be glad to look at it for you. It won't be like, hey, I'll look at it and then you'll get the answer back that day. It may be a day or two before I can do that, just because I'm balancing so much. I decided to take today and tomorrow off. So I'm like, I'm doing a live chat with my buddies because I haven't done this in 2 weeks. So and then I'm going to take mom out to dinner tonight. And then the cooking begins. The cooking. Um, Nick Sarah, 75 YBA says, George Metropolis, one of my buddies, 69 YVMs, heated a Vox, basement plexi, and untouched. Yeah, George does great work. And that's something you can do with a multi-channel amp. It depends on how they do the channel mixing. Most PA amps do passive mixing, and you lose a lot of gain. If George isn't tasked with keeping it original, lots of things are possible. And I'm sure that whatever George did is pretty much what I would have done. Clark Blacker says, considering the high prices for well-made clones, isn't a high-quality original amp a better investment? It certainly has been for most of my guitar playing life. The originals are getting more expensive now. I've been doing a bunch of research getting prepped to do the Amp Center $2,000 video, part 1. There's gonna be 2 of those. And it's just staggering what the market demands are. And, you can get a 76 twin for $1,000. You can get a 60s, like 66 Bandmaster, like 1,400. Bandmaster with cab, 1,800. You can get a black panel super reverb for below 2,000. You can get a few silver-faced Princetons. You can't get any 60s Princetons or any 60s deluxe reverbs, and very few silver-faced deluxe reverbs or vibroverbs for under 2,000 because everyone's going to smaller amps. So the Princetons, the deluxes, the vibroverbs are the amps to have. Not vibroverbs, sorry, vibroluxes. I always flip those in my head. But people don't want the larger, heavier, louder ones. So the supers are not as valuable these days, which means that you could go out and buy a 2-rock, or you could go buy a 60s, including a 62 I saw, Bandmaster and a super reverb. I'd rather have the super reverb than the 2-rock myself. The Moody Loners on a 78 deluxe reverb with the push-pull gain switch. What would you recommend doing with that part of the circuit to make it actual useful and less awful sounding? Well, I strip out all that part of the circuit, and I'll leave the master volume. So wait, that one doesn't have the master volume, does it? That's the other amps. The deluxe reverb. I'm trying to remember which pot it is that has that. But yeah, that boost is terrible. I take all that out and put that to AB 763. If you have a leftover switch in the amp and a deluxe reverb, best thing to do is a variable mids resistor to go between you can go between the stock 6.8K and then maybe the 24K in addition to that. So you go between like 33K or 6.8K to give a mids boost or something. That would be much more useful. I think that's more useful than the trim bypass stuff or the negative feedback stuff because you get some grunt where it matters in the circuit. I just saw a question for the ages and I scrolled too fast. Let's see. Hi, David S. says, being self employed, are there days when you wish you weren't constantly dealing with the public? How often do you encounter problematic customers? Well, there are days it gets frustrating because I'll get people, c- the standard thing that every tech gets where the people call, hey, man, I'm not in any rush, but I just calling to see if it's ready yet. I'll let you know when it's done. I'm still waiting for parts to come in. 2 days later, hey, I'm not in any rush, but I just wanted to know if it's done yet. Is it done yet? Is it ready yet? Is it done yet? Is it ready yet? And every time I stop to answer questions like this, that's work I'm not getting done on something else. So if I'll be sitting here working on customer A's app, customer B calls. I don't want to disrespect customer B, so I take the call and I try to say, yeah, dude, I told you, I will let you know, but I can't say that. So that's 5 minutes, sometimes more, because I have to explain the entire thing because they didn't understand the first time. And that means that customer A's amp takes longer to fix. And then, of course, when customer B's amp is done, and I call and say, "Hey, that's done. It's going to be $240 labor, and it was $73 in parts." Hey, man, that's cool. I'm gonna need a couple weeks to get the cash together. Is that okay? Yeah. So there are days it gets frustrating, but every day that I'm not um, standing on my feet working retail or digging a ditch is a good day because I've done all those things. I've done my job managing retail stores. I've done jobs working in warehouses. I have done concrete work over the summer when I was younger and up to that kind of thing. So I'm not sweating. I'm not having heat stroke. I'm not having to call anyone sir. I'm not having to put on that fake voice all the time. And I also have the ability to occasionally say, "Pardon my French, but you're an asshole," and then I will fire a customer occasionally, and it feels awesome. Not in a "Do you know who I am?" sense, but just in a "Have you ever spoken to a human being before?" Because that's not how we speak to each other, and I'm not doing this. Um, some people like to be angry, and I scrolled up too far this time. Almost back. I need someone not to answer questions for me, but just to have control of the scroll. Hey there, I have a 64 AC36 twin reverb which arrived without a reverb tank. Okay. Okay. Should be a great amp. I'd have to get out the book to pull the reverb. If you're asking for which reverb tank it takes, I'd have to look that up, but I'm sure Google has the same information. Hey, Sergeant Grinch. Merry Christmas to you too, sir. Paul Court says, I have an old wah face and an old color sound wah swell that need pot switched out. Be willing to give you the color sound plus repairs if you do a video. Well, that's very kind of you. I'd be glad to repair those for you. But I have no business playing wah. I've tried too many times to play wah. It's odd. I can play drums. I used to have drums. I was fairly good at it. Not professional, but I was fairly good at it. So that limb independence and coordination was never a problem. But on wah, it doesn't work. I don't know why. I just don't have that. Chris Carlson, when is the $2,000 video coming out? I was hoping to do it by Christmas as a Christmas present. And thanks for 30,000, or I guess now thanks for 31,000 video, combining all these things. But I've just had so many other things happening. I'm gonna try to get it done, maybe up as a happy 2023 for everybody. I want to get it done. Those things do take a lot of work. Um, you know, um, There are channels that do one video a week, and they have oftentimes one guy or woman who's the face, and they have other people doing the research, and they have other people doing the editing, and so it's really a team, and they've got camera operators and stuff. I'm not that, and I do many more videos a week than just the one, so it's hard to compete. Okay, here's the question. I have a 64 AC36 twin reverb, which arrived without a reverb tank. Can I swap it for something better? Do I need to rebuild the reverb circuit to do this? No, the reverb's okay in the old Vox, and on a 64, keep everything as original as possible. Um, Tanks exist for that. Um, but depending on where you live, you probably would need to take that to a tech to have it restored. But yeah, I mean, or just don't use it. I don't think that the AC30 ever needed reverb, but your amp originally did have it. It can have it again. Greg McCourt asks, is there a significant difference between front-loaded and rear-loaded cabs? If so, what? There is, but it doesn't really affect us. If you're doing a PA build, if you're doing a PA speaker, if you're doing even some bass speakers, it can matter in terms of how the vibrations and the baffle, the whole system works together. But that is a lot more power and a lot more frequency and a lot more excursion than we have with guitar amps. So it really does not matter in a guitar amp. Even a 200 watt is not going to be a factor. So don't worry about front versus rear loaded for our purposes. Clyde Broadway asks, for longevity, is it better to play an amp every day or alternate with another amp? It does not matter. But if you have 3 amps, try to give them each relatively equal playing time, or at least more than an hour a month. Try to play if you own more than one amp. Try to play each one at least 5-6 hours a month, just to keep everything from drying out. Chris Meyer says, my 68 Custom has a 10-inch greenback, actually. Not that bad. Stock speaker. All right, so yours is the Princeton with the vibrations. So if you don't have the G10, if you have the greenback, so let's see if your tech put in a new set of JJs, because techs don't all know, but JJs just don't hold up in combos. Yeah, and Richard Namagatsu, I've shown this in other videos. Most of the Fender reissue series come from the factory with a lot of screws that aren't quite tight. Greg McCourt says EEL 84 versus 6L6 versus KT88s. It depends on what they're in. You can build a great amp with any of those. You can build a poor amp with any of those, but those tubes are not interchangeable with each other. So it's not like you're left with that dilemma in one amp. Victor Beebe, any experience with a Marshall JTM 60 1x12 combo? Yeah, it's possibly the worst amp Marshall ever designed, structurally, sonically, in terms of reliability. The thing is comically badly built and wants to burn itself and will burn itself and often does. And while there are fixes for it, it's just such a hot mess of nope. Sell to some poor other sucker is my honest opinion on that. It's just ridiculous that you'd have an app that poorly built with that logo on it. Jeremy Green says, hi, Lyle. Why would the bias on a 50-watt JC100 drift? I set it about 36 milliamps. The next time I turn it on, it'll be closer to 32. And the next time, 38. It says, okay, all tubes and caps are new. Thanks. There are a lot of reasons that could happen. But number one, are you monitoring your wall voltage? Because your wall voltage may be going between 100 120 and 112 and 124. And every time your wall voltage changes, which you typically won't notice unless you meter it, the bias of your amp will change. So unless you are saying each time it is 120 volts and the bias is moving around that much, um, I wouldn't worry about it. And even so, as long as it's not getting hotter and hotter, you're probably not going to have a problem. George McCourt, he loves his metronome. More musicians need to have that sentiment. That's one of the differences between Steve Selvage yesterday and me. I keep pointing over there where he was sitting. He's not there right now. Sorry. Um, in addition to the fact that he gigs all the time, he has spent many more hours playing with records than I have. He's played uh, and just sat down with a metronome more than I have. And you know, I'm not jealous of his success. I'm not jealous of his ability to play. I'm jealous that he's been able to make that time, not to find that time, to make that time in his life to do what he loves. And I have not been able to find the time to be as good a player as perhaps I could have been. And it's easy for me to say, oh, I lost part of a finger, I got nerve damage, blah blah blah. But a lot of it's just intent. Didn't stop Django, but Django was also much more talented than I am. Yeah, JD says Jeremy Green, what voltage was coming out of your wall those 3 times you measured it? Talking about the bias. Yeah, exactly right. Hello, VDub guy says hello from Ontario, Canada. I have the Hot Rod Deluxe 2 upgraded with a creamback speaker, filter caps, and the maintenance mods done. What's the differences with HRD4? Can I get mods so it's the same? The only difference between the 2 and the 4 is cosmetic. Seriously, they changed from the chrome panel to the black panel. I don't know whether it's because the black panel, control the powder coat control panel costs less to make, or just because the chrome ones were so prone to rust and pitting. All the cosmetic changes, all the changes in all the hot rods are cosmetic. The Blues Junior is cosmetic. They like the Blues Junior 2, the Blues Junior 3, the Blues Junior 4. There's a few little differences on the Blues Juniors, like I think it's C109. Anyway, they used to have a cap that rolled off the highs and the reverb. Whoop-de-doo, makes no big difference. Gordon Action, wonder if you have changed anything in your broadcast sound. The sound was great in your catch-up video. Well, thank you for that. The catch-up video, I have changed something on the sound. There are 2 ways I do voiceover for these videos. And I'm trying to show you, but it's all bundled up. So when I'm doing this, I've got a Beta 87, and it's running straight into the mic pre, and that just goes out. And I think that the YouTube live streaming software has a little bit of gain compensation built into it. I've tried to do running this through the Logic for some compression and stuff for this, but it doesn't really work with this YouTube thing. I've got to get OBS or some other system so I can really take advantage of that stuff. When I'm doing a video on the bench, I have this hat on with this little lav mic, and I used to have the lav mic here, and I was getting too much. It just really exaggerated my breath, and plosives were kind of a problem, and the volume had changed too much. So now I have it to the side. That's part of it. The other thing is the software program that I use, Filmic Pro, came out with a new version where I could actually set. Before, it just had a slider for the mic volume, but that slider had no number associated with it. So I was just like, right about there is pretty good. But now they've made it so there's a number that changes as you hit the slider. So I was able to say, okay, 75. 75 gives me enough headroom that I'm not going to clip it with my voice. And so every time I record, if I'm doing the voiceover, now I can be very consistent from take to take, because sometimes it'll reset if I stop recording a bit and move the camera to do the next bit of the amp. But now I can get right back to 75 each time. So those are the differences. I'm always trying to make this better, but uh, I'm not sure what, unless I do one of those face filter things where I'll look 20 years younger. RJB, Raquel Welch, or Linda Carter. Boy, that'd be a tough situation to find yourself in real life if that were a choice I would ever have to make. But being a child of the 70s, Linda Carter did accelerate my puberty. So, she was a wonder. William Bach, ever try out a vintage 47 amp? I've never tried one, but I've been inside one, and oh my God, what an piece of shit. Avoid, avoid, avoid. I know that's not a very popular thing, but it's absolutely unsafe. There's a video on my Facebook channel of me going through and documenting everything wrong with it. And it takes a while because there's so much wrong with it. Oh, let me show you guys something else. I got this amp in yesterday and started to do a standard video on it. And I'm debating whether to probably going to wait till a few days after Christmas so I don't come across as just a Grinch. But this is a total piece, if you can see inside there. It's amazing how bad this is. One of these wires here, see if you can see it, from the output transformer secondary is spliced to this wire, which is then spliced to this wire. Tons of electrical tape. Everything in here is spliced. It looks like it was done, had the world's worst repair. Some of it is bad repair, some of it is factory, which is a shame because the rest of it looks kind of pretty. But this thing was just horrendous. And I'm actually going to decline to do any work on it because any work I do on it is just a band-aid because the whole thing should be ripped out and rebuilt properly. Unless the client wants to give me like $800 to make him an amp out of this thing, in which case this other company gets the credit. That whole thing is just a nightmare, and I don't want to be married to it and have any responsibility for it. Federico Spanghero says, "Hi, Lyle." Hi, Federica. I have a chance on a Fender Pro Reverb 65 or 66. Non-original parts include transformer, the Hammond, speakers, and some inner components. A little too much for 2,000 euros, maybe? I don't know. I don't know the market. That 2,000 might, and also the market has gone so crazy. So in America, 2,000 for a non-original transformer, is it the output or the power? That seems a little high, but those are such great amps. And honestly, the Hammond is fine if it was appropriately changed out. If it's in Europe, there are going to be fewer 60 Fenders in Europe than there are in America. So 2,000 euros might be just fine, but I don't keep up with that kind of stuff. So the Stealth is a tube amp. Sorry, I'm just now catching up to that. I don't know whether that amp is worth repairing or not. I don't have any familiarity with it. Sorry. Richard Turner, shoot me an email and I'll look for it. Sorry, I've been playing catch up on so many emails. It's really, I don't mean to be like, I just get so many emails, guys. God, I'm just so popular, but it's a problem. I could spend 3 days doing nothing but emails, and then I'd have to reply to more emails saying, why isn't any work getting done? Andy K when says, when servicing amplifiers, which multimeters meet your requirements? Flukes are great, but seem like overkill just to read milliamps and volts up to 500 volts. I agree. I've got this little Thisinde, Thisinde, whatever, THSINDE 18B plus. I got it from Amazon. It's like 25 bucks. Measures up to 700 volts DC, I believe. And it's been fine. This is my second one. The first one lasted over a year, and I got this one. And the probes that come with are crap. And so I ordered some Fluke probes, and these Fluke probes are kind of crap too. So I'm going to get some better probes. I need to talk to my buddy Brad and see which ones he recommends because he's meter man. He owns like 18 and uses like 10 at a time. But my plan is to get like 2 or 3 more of these for 25 bucks each with some really good probes and have 99% of all metering covered. So this is sufficient for tube amp work. And it reads capacitance and diodes as well. Colby Jack asks, can we arrange for me to ship my amp to you in 23 for repair? A boutique amp bought new has had problems off and on from day one, even after a trip to the factory who let it sit for 3 months. That's a fun thing. That's a fun situation for you to be in. Shoot me an email. I'll call you about that. In general, I prefer to get just the chassis of an amplifier rather than the entire thing. It saves tremendous amount of weight and size for shipping costs, and it's much safer usually to send a metal box than the whole thing. Rob Hensel says, I've learned so much from you, Lyle. Thank you. Thank you for all you do and being willing to share your knowledge. Happy Christmas, good sir. Thank you very much, Rob. Appreciate that. Um, Richard Namagatsu says, what is a good alternative to an SVT? I would look at what professional bassists are using on tour. And the ones who aren't using SVTs, see what they're using. Getty did the last, I think, 10 years of his career with the Sansamp RBI, just going direct. So it's going to depend on the player. But, I think the Aguilar Class D stuff is really popular with bassists today for a reason. William Son, what are your thoughts on Mesa Boogie being bought out? Yeah, Mesa being bought by Gibson. It's kind of like if you were to walk into a room and see all your ex-wives talking to each other. We'll see what happens. If Henry J were still around, I'd wonder if both companies would go bankrupt in 6 months. But Henry J is gone, and Gibson seems to be doing better. It's not the Henry J days of Gibson buying a company, then never hearing from it again. Slingerland, Oberheim, Steinberger, all these companies that they bought and then they just killed. So maybe it'll be good, but I'm not a huge fan of Mesa, as you might know. So thanks, Andy K. Appreciate that. Well, see, we've been doing this now for an hour and 15 minutes, and my coffee is down just to the switchcraft jack. So I'm gonna go get some more. Let's do a 4 or 5 minute break, and then we will resume. So let me do my fancy thing where I say intermission, and we're going to take a brief intermission. Where's the mute button? Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Take this jack and put it in some isopropyl. I wash out in hot water, but I don't want it to rust from its coffee bath. So, give me just a second. Pretty exciting stuff. Slanta. Don't do that. All right, put this to the side. And that switchcraft will live again. Have I ever worked on Black Star tube amps, or what do I think of them? I have. Just had one in the other week, the other day, in the video, 5 amps in one video. I don't think highly of them. If you want to know why, see my Amps Under $500 video. I gave them a pretty thorough discussion there. Let's see. That's where it was. Let's see here. Save Ferris. That's right. Randy Steffs offers a very good point, which would seem to argue with what I'm saying, but it actually agrees with what I said in the previous video. I advise my guitar students to always use an amp because you can get away with a lot of bad technique without the amp, especially if you overplay, play too hard, or you don't understand muting and stuff. Practice without an amp hindered my progress as a player. Yeah, I mean, I covered that before, where if you're just coming from playing modelers and then you play into a real Marshall on stage, it may sound like a train wreck, and not the expensive good kind. So it's good to do both, but as far as just practicing, you don't have to have an amp. It's always good to have one. What is that acoustic? This is my Eastman. What is this one called? The E8D. And it's their version of an HD28 with a herringbone. And it's really nice. It's Sitka spruce, solid top, rosewood sides and back, really nice mahogany neck. I even got a little bit of flame to it. Really nice profile. It's got a little volute and the open back tuners, which you may or may not be able to see. I have played many, many Martins, and I've played a lot of guitars. And this plays as well as most Martins I've played, up to about 3,000. And the next level up in quality over this, I would say, would be Collings and Bourgeois for quite a bit more. What's wrong with the tube pacemaker for $600? It's essentially the Cambridge without reverb, if it's the amp I'm thinking of. If it's the old pacemaker, that's not too bad. I was thinking of the practice amp thing. So I might have gotten that one wrong, Jimmy Joe Fine. Yeah, I thought. See, I get so few Thomas Organ era Voxes. I forgot that the pacemaker and the Cambridge are the same thing. I thought it was the Cambridge or the Cambridge Reverb. But most of the pacemakers I've had come in have been not very good. But yeah, if it's the same thing as a Cambridge without reverb, that would be fine. Then you might have been happy with it. Sorry. I don't get everything right. I try. Jim Cox, thank you very much. The Output Jack Washing Fund. Well, that more than covered that bit of isopropyl alcohol. So there you go. Uncle Meat has joined us. Happy Festivus to you too, sir. Thomas Moore says, I have a Fender Concert Rivera with a 12-inch EV, electric voice. It weighs 72 pounds. What's a good speaker that will lower the weight, or should I just leave it alone and get a different amp to gig with? Lots of different speakers will sound fine. An EV is a good sounding speaker, but I don't think it's worth the weight. Um, uh, it depends on what sound you want. If you want real bright, you want real full frequency, you want more of a mid thing. That's this back to the endless speaker quest. But there are many speakers that will sound not the same, but as subjectively good as electric voice and will weigh a ton less. Grump Chump says, "Hey, Lyle, music shop I work for recently started carrying third power amplification. They're based in Tennessee. Was wondering if you've heard anything about them. I've heard good things about them, but I have not had one in or played any. So, Dr. Paul says, danger money for the coffee drinking heroics. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure I drank a little bit of flux. Other than that, I'm sure I've breathed enough of it in over the years. Rocking Chair Boogie says, I have a Black Star HT40 1x12 combo that I use in church. I know you don't care for them. Is there anything that can be done to make it better, or is it not cost effective? I understand why people like them, that you get an awful lot of different sounds for the money. And some of them are quite good sounds. And I've been very clear about that. And, it's never that I'm slamming them. It's that while you get a lot of different sounds, there's just no guarantee how long you'll be able to experience those sounds. And they fail typically for fairly stupid reasons. And they were not designed to be field serviceable. And indeed, they do not repair them. If you get one that has a failure under warranty, they swap the whole board. That's how it was designed. If it fails out of warranty, they want you to buy an entirely new amp. And I don't like that. Um, so hopefully it will last a really long time. Other than making sure that all the solder joints are good, there's not much you can do on one of those. Um, you know, it is what it is. Um, they are at least relatively inexpensive amps. So it's not like you're paying $2,000 or even $1,000, hopefully. But I think there are better amps in that same price range that offer similar functionality. For example, the Marshall DSL 40 C and CR, which are not world class amps, but they are better than the Black Star and offer pretty much the same range of sounds and features. Thanks, Johnny Watkins. He says, I'm looking for a more affordable alternative to a deluxe reverb. I'm mostly interested in the clean sound, not into digital, and hoping for a recommendation. Well, the deluxe reverb issue is in the real world considered very affordable. Um, uh, I don't know that there is anything non-digital less expensive than a deluxe reverb. You can get a used reissue for like $700, I believe. That's fairly inexpensive these days. The only other there are used amps, the clean sound in that crate vintage club series I've got here. You can sometimes get those for $200-300 that work great. That particular $200-300 crate needs a full recap. And so then you've got to spend another $200 on your bargain amp, and you're right back up in the price range that a used deluxe reverb would have cost. I'm sorry to be negative. I don't mean to constantly be a source of negativity or perceived snobbery, but uh, you know, a deluxe reverb is both a standard for a good reason, and it's kind of traditionally the starting point of good amps. The Princeton, I guess, is the next tier down, but I mean this kindly. When I was starting this whole crazy process, I mowed more yards until I could get the thing worth buying. And whatever the equivalent of that is, it's better to save up and pay a little bit more and get something really good. Hey, Edward LaRose, thanks for joining us. You just went to see the new Avatar with the family. Hope you enjoyed it. admit that I have never enjoyed Avatar. I saw the first one with my kids in the movie theater, and it was like watching someone else play a video game. And now they've offered me the opportunity to do that again. I politely declined, but I hope that you and your family enjoyed the hell out of it. Richard Namagatsu asks, "Do you have any cooking shows coming up again?" The cast iron cornbread was fantastic. Hey, I'm glad to know you tried it. It is really good stuff. Thank you for trying it. Um, um, Even R.R. Pease made the cornbread, but he did a keto version and asked the same question, planning on doing any more cooking videos. I had actually done a cooking video at Thanksgiving that I could not share with you guys. I was doing my sweet potatoes recipe, which I might redo at some point just because it's awesome and I want to have it again. But as I was doing it, I was listening to Stevie Wonder talking book in the background, and I wasn't going to monetize the video because I don't monetize the videos like that. If cooking videos, the various things I do on the side, I don't monetize, no ads. So I thought I'd be fine with that, but that video was blocked because it had Stevie Wonder music in the background. And I think that's insane. And Stevie Wonder would probably think that's insane. And, that all that will happen from that is someone who might not know that great Stevie Wonder album won't be exposed to that great Stevie Wonder album. So, but yeah, I will be doing more cooking videos as time allows. Coming up on New Year's, I might do one for some black eyed peas, some southern black eyed peas, because I go other places in the country and it's canned, bland nonsense. And I scroll down too far. I just touched it and it just jumps. I don't think I'm doing it. I think it's trying to make me be current, which is not what I want it to do. And there's no setting for that. Uh, Allstack the second says, "Your skills and info are truly the best. Thank you very much." I don't know about that. There are a lot of really great techs in the world. I am perhaps fortunate in that most of the ones who are truly either better or just much more experienced than I are also 20 years older and don't want to have anything to do with YouTube, etc. So I'm in the sweet spot. I'm old enough to be a wise old man on YouTube, but I'm young enough to be on YouTube. I'm not old. I'm 51. I'm prematurely gray. This happened when I hit 30. Um, so I'm young enough to be able to do the YouTube, and I'm young enough to be able to pick up an SVT, but I'm old enough to know what to do with an SVT. So I try not to hold myself up as the amp tech, the ologist. I'm one of many amp techs. I try to be very good, and it means a lot to me that you and my peers seem to hold me in some esteem, but that's something I've got to earn every day. Anyway, to his question, is there any modern Fender amp that is not poorly manufactured? Yeah, the reissue series are not poorly manufactured. They are manufactured fairly well to a price point, and I've detailed where that has introduced some problems, but also how to fix them. Uh, in general, any good tech can make the needed changes to any of the reissue apps for 2 or 3 hours of labor, which is typically going to be in the $100 to $250 range, depending on where you live and what the techs charge an hour. But it's really simple stuff, and I've shown this, I've shared this. There are things I keep to myself, and there are things I'm like, well, I'm not going to be able to fix every amp out there. I don't need to pretend to that. So let's tell the world how to fix a hot rod. Tell the world how to fix the deluxe reverb reissue, etc. Tell the world how to fix the heater balance problems in a Marshall 1987X reissue, so that they can have their techs do it. Um, it's not brain surgery. It's stuff that decisions they made to a price point, sometimes by, I assume, very well-intentioned young engineers who know how to design circuit boards, but don't necessarily have deep insight into what happens in tube amps over the years. Mark's gas station says Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, folks. Same to all. And to those who celebrate Hanukkah or Kwanzaa, I just hope everybody has a great time. I hope everyone's enjoying themselves. Um, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Chappy Chanukah, et cetera, et cetera. Christopher Sambuco says, "Hey Lyle, are you planning on building any Fendery voiced amps in the new year?" Well, I have an order in for a 6v6 custom, which is my take on what a deluxe reverb can be. But I'm still waiting to get the front panels so I can finish that. That's the only one that I'm plan on doing. Someday maybe I'll offer more different models, but as far as custom builds, I'll take on the occasional, whatever you'd like. And this guy wanted, the world's best deluxe reverb, and I hope to feature that soon. I got to get the front panel sorted out. Mr. Buttons says, "Is a mid-60s Pro reverb with non-original transformers worth getting? How different would a replacement transformer be in one of those?" It's worth getting. It depends what the price is, and it's just so hard to keep up with the market on all that stuff. But while the original Schumachers are fantastic, Hammonds are quite good. I would not say, "Oh, I couldn't possibly play that amp. It only has a Hammond." This if it's the correct transformer for that model and it was properly installed, Leo would have used them. If Leo had said, "Oh, Schumacher's $30 a transformer, and I get the same thing from Hammond for 28," they would have had Hammonds, and they probably would have sounded just as good. Bruno Raphael Papandrea says, Buon Natale from Italy. Buongiorno. Grazie. Wes Chilton says, "Hey there, Lyle. Sorry I'm late. Just got back from a week out in the Mojave Desert. Very nice. Holy crap. Vanguard just dropped a big top chat on me. It must be Christmas. Let me go ahead and read his off the iPad because usually I get them in order here, but I don't want to miss this one. I have really enjoyed your show for a few months now. Thank you for both the technical content and for the soothing sound of your voice, helping me fall asleep. I'm glad to have been assistance there. I have put many people to sleep while talking about technical stuff. If my wife ever has insomnia, I can just try to explain how capacitors work. She goes right out. Anyway, I kid. Thank you very much." He says, "Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and continued success." Thank you very much, Vanguard. That means a lot to me. I appreciate that very much. All right. First Last says, "Can you or could you recommend someone to work on a Roland RE301 Space Echo?" Talking about the old tape Echo, not the new pedals. Yeah, I used to have a friend down in the Fort Worth area. Dustin, I can't remember his last name right now. It's been several years. He got off Facebook, and I don't know whether he still does this. But there are people out there. But no one occurs to me right now. I'm sure that someone in the comments will probably reply to you first last. But it is a very specialized thing. And I know some guys who do it. I'm in various tech groups, but I don't recall which one specifically because it's hard for me to keep track of which guy does what specialty. But shoot me an email. I'll try to get you in touch with someone. That's a pretty specialized thing these days. Jeff Mansfield, would it be helpful to copy paste an email to all new clients informing them that you have no desire to hang on to their amp after it's repaired and that you'll tell them when it's ready? One would think that. I'd say the bulk of customers know that, and there's no need to tell them that. And the ones that who need telling, it would do no good. you know, um, it's just the human nature. Some people go into every transaction expecting to be cheated, and some people go into every transaction feeling the need to win, to beat the other person. And I've encountered all that kind of stuff. And I'm fortunately getting to the point with doing this where, hmm, you're being really problematic, and life is short. And I've got like 100 guys who want me to work on their app. Here you go. Peace out. Enjoy your life. We're not going to work together. It sounds big headed, but it's the more I do this and the longer this goes and the more well known I become, the more that gives me some sanity to say, I don't think that you and I are going to work well together. This is not going to be the thing. There are lots of guys um, who will install the tubes that you provide and will uh, follow your directions, and they'll laugh at you, but they'll take your money. And I just rather would fix your app and this all this in between stuff. No, let's not do that. I'll do some work for someone else. Richard Namagatsu says, "What are the 3 amps you want to have on hand when you retire?" Oh, I don't know. Hopefully, my arthritis won't prevent me from playing. But the 3 amp, I look. It's no secret that I love an AC30. And if you heard that video with Steve yesterday, you'd know that a real good Vox overlaps a lot with a good Plexi era Marshall. So I might go for that to cover all that. Um, Last time I was asked about the same kind of question, it was 5 amps and Desert Island, and I said deluxe reverb, and I was kicking myself afterwards because while I do love a deluxe reverb, I think the Vibrolux reverb is a more interesting sound. So I would probably go with Vibrolux reverb. And then because it's for my own purposes, there's a 49 Gibson BR4. I believe that's the model that I restored on here a few years ago. And it's a crazy little circuit with a pentode front end and tons of gain. And I've got a video up of Joe Restivo playing his 48. It's a 46 BR4. It's 46, and he's playing his 48 Epiphone Zephyr and my Telly, which is essentially a copy of a 51. And that would be something really awesome to have because it just does all those great sounds. I mean, Grant Green's in there, T-Bone Walker's in there. Um, um, all the early rock and roll stuff. You can do Scotty Moore on that. You can do Bill Haley. You can do Muddy Waters. You can do Howlin' Wolf. It is so cool. It's a really good sounding amp. I don't think I'd want that actual amp because the build quality of the Gibson was kind of iffy, but to build one for myself would be fun. Look for that video on my page, Gibson BR4, or look for Joe Restivo. Maybe I'll put it in the comments after this. Jake Day says, who's making the best EL84 and 12X7s these days? Consistency and reliability. I would say this week, the Tube Amp Doctor line probably wins, followed by the JJ. If you understand that the JJ costs enough less that if you get the occasional dud, it's kind of an acceptable trade-off. Steve sounded great in that AC15 yesterday. That was a pair of JJ EL84s. They work really well when they work. I haven't had as many problems with their EL84s. Lately, the 12X7s, I think they have gone to a thinner glass, and sometimes they lose vacuum for no reason. But when they work, they sound really good, and they're really quiet as far as microphonics and often as far as self-noise goes. 3 years ago, there were a lot more tubes on the market. And I really like the Mullard reissued CB4004s. And then towards the end of their availability, they started to get noisy. And now with embargoes, they're off the market. So the TAD and Tube Amp Doctor, which are well-sorted Chinese tubes, and the Slovakian JJs, I think, are fine for both those things. I used to like the Russian, surplus, I can't remember the Russian tube model, that, the tube store was selling as 7189s, which is a beefed up 14-watt EL84. I like those an awful lot, but again, right now, Russia. 420 Satisfaction says, Sativa's faction, sorry. Because the 420 wasn't subtle enough. Why on earth did Marshall make the FX loop on the DSL-40 parallel? I had a tech modify it to series. Fortunately, he put the mod on switch because it ruined the amp sound. I don't know. I would never make an amp with a parallel effects loop myself unless it was switchable. And a series loop. I don't want to speak poorly of your tech, but it's a fairly simple circuit, and it would be very easy to change it to series without negatively affecting the sound. But it's just the honest truth, and not all techs are created equal. Um, I don't know why Marshall did that in parallel. It's weird. Unless they did it in parallel so they didn't have to deal with level inconsistencies and explaining to their buyers about -10 versus -30 and all that stuff. Because a lot of the DSL-40 is a good amp, but it's aimed at the beginner and the intermediate guitarist, many of whom don't have pro gear, and they're gonna wanna expect to use whatever that pedals they have in the loop and not have to go buy all Strymon or all whatever that can handle the higher level. But that's a whole bunch of supposition on my part. But it is possible to make that loop series without any negative connotation. Bill Box says, would an 18-watt EL84 output transformer be suitable for an AC15 build? Yeah. Do drop-in AC15 output transformers make a big difference? In other words, the amp doesn't care if it's the Marshall 18-watt output transformer or the Vox AC15 output transformer. You can use either. The big things in a AC15 versus the Marshall 18-watt, the AC15 used a much larger choke, and the power transformer can draw more current. Not so much versus, I guess I think the AC15's got a little more HT secondary than the 1974X. Other than that, the current's about the same. It's trying to think of how to phrase this. If you have a real Drake, etc., Marshall 18-watt, and you change it for a real, even Hammond and better AC15 output transformer, you're not going to hear much of a difference. It's going to be a slightly different primary impedance and a little bit different reflected impedance as a result, but it's minor. There is a difference between the stock transformer that you would find in the custom classic series and a Hammond or a Habor. The custom classic transformers are not as good sounding as the ones used in the new custom series, which are the same ones pretty much used in the hand-wired series. The transformers used in the TVX series were garbage. Same bad late 80s transformers used in the Reissue Marshalls, and they constantly have buzzing issues. Just people give the TBX amps way too much credit and way too much esteem, and they were not well built or designed. David S. asks, what does crossover distortion sound like? Man, that's a tough one to answer because it'd be easy for me to dial in a cold, really frigid bias on amp and show you. It's hard to verbalize it. There's a When an amp is operating properly, there's an almost liquid feel to things. When an amp is in crossover distortion, even before its real noticeable artifacts, everything has got kind of a hard feel to it. There's a beginning of a square wave, and your sustain is affected. The attack doesn't feel as pleasing. Um, this is going to be an extreme analogy. Let's say you normally play with a 1 millimeter, or in this case, 0.88 millimeter pick, or a 2 millimeter pick. And then someone hands you a Fender ultra thin, ultra light, the real floppy thing. And everything just kind of clicks on the strings and the feel of everything is off. It's that kind of difference. Even before there's an audible artifact of the crossover distortion, the amp just feels harder and smaller. Notice that most mesas intentionally run the amps in crossover distortion city, and some people like the fizziness that gives. I find it off-putting. Harmonica Boybukin says, "Fan of the channel. Thanks for what you do. Thank you for joining us, and that's very kind." Steve Selvage is a badass for sure. He is a badass, and he is a badass that I have known since I was about 19 or so, and he was about 16 or 17. He was a skinny little kid working behind the counter at a vintage guitar store in town, and my mom knew his dad, and we've known each other on and off our adult lives, and been parallel guitar paths, though his was a much more direct path. I came back to it, and but he's really a funny guy, and he's a really nice guy, and he's a really good dad, and he's a good, surprising good baker. He brought me some Christmas cookies the other day, so we love Steve very much around here. He brings us cookies and makes us sound good on the internets. Is there an affordable way to monitor wall voltage? Is it worth trying to control it? Richard Namagitsu asks. Well, I have a power conditioner in my that everything's connected to, primarily so that if the wall voltage goes over 128, everything shuts off, so nothing gets damaged. It's got a meter, and right now it's fluctuating between 114 and 115. But you don't have to have that. You can just take a meter, set it to read AC right there. Hot, neutral. What do you measure? It'll tell me the exact same thing. So you don't have to constantly monitor it. If you want it to be controlled, for most guitarists' purposes, you can just go get a UPC, an uninterruptible power supply, sold for computer uses, like $60 on Amazon, and just make sure that it has enough, can supply the current needed. Pardon me, for your amp. Don't have 10 Marshalls plugged into it at once, but one Marshall, or a Princeton, whatever, or two Princetons. So watch the power consumption. But all it does is you say, all right, set to 120. If the voltage is lower than 120 for a good long while, it makes up the difference from its battery. If the voltage exceeds 120, all the excess goes into its battery. And so it's a battery supply. And that works well. I wouldn't power everything in your house from it, but if you just want to make sure that, hey, I got a deluxe reverb and I always want it to have 120, there you go. I think there's some that you can, yeah, definitely. There's some that you can set to 120 or 110. So beyond that, you need to get into brown boxes or variacs and stuff. Clyde Broadway says, could you tell the differences between a twin, a super, a deluxe, etc.? Are they just different flavors? Oh, yeah, you can tell the differences once you know what you're listening for. They have very different speakers. They have very different responses. Um, a twin typically has a lot less mids than a deluxe reverb. A super reverb has a lot more lower mids than a twin or a deluxe reverb. The deluxe and the super reverb have two amplification, little softer attack. Um, but mostly it's just the speaker difference that you're really experiencing. A twin with a pair of C12 ends sounds very different than a single Oxford in a deluxe reverb. Part of it's the speaker, part of it's the number of speakers, part of it's just the volume of the cabinet. And then 4x10s with it, especially if you have the old CTS Alnicos and the super reverb. Now it's a shame that due to impedances, you can't just say, I'm gonna run the twin into the super reverb cab. I mean, you can, it's a mismatch, but um, yeah, they're very different circuits. So it's the same basic circuit run at very different voltages with different rectification into very different speakers. Leo was a genius in that you know, aside from the Princeton and the Bassman, every amp made from 63 to 69 used the same board. The front panel was almost the same. Some of them had a mid spot, some of them didn't. Some of them had um, reverb, some of them didn't. Some of them had a bright switch, some of them didn't. That's pretty simple stuff. The board itself and what was on the board was the same for all those amps, aside from some of the non-reverbs amps, which were just the head parts not populated, and one resistor difference in the phase inverter from the 6V6 to the 6L6 amps. And he made all these different models out of one basic, really good idea. But yeah, you can hear and feel the difference very much. RRP says, do you know if anyone has ever made a fuzz face and tube screamer 2-in-1 pedal? I'm sure someone has. I don't know that I'd want them to be a 2-in-1 pedal. I would want some separation between the two. You certainly want the fuzz face before anything else, except maybe a wah, because you don't want any buffers or a low impedance output of a different circuit in front of that. A fuzz face needs to be hooked up pretty much straight to your pickup to work right. I'm gonna come back to that in just a second. Scott Wilcox says, Merry Christmas to you and your family. May your holidays be safe and joyful. Thank you, Scott. You've been very kind. I got a Mesa to finish up for you, buddy. And when you talk about that Fender, I think you got that sorted. Noah Rocks says, I can either leave it at the shop or hand it off if we see each other. A beat of beer, Dixie beer, something else. We'll talk. Yeah, the thing I would want most from Noah would be from that really good French pastry shop over on Magazine Street. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it's just La Boulangerie over on Magazine Street. Maybe some croissant. We'll talk. I'll be glad to pay you to bring me a 6 or a dozen croissant from there. Going back to the fuzz face and tube screamer 2-in-1 pedal. I'm a huge Pink Floyd fan, and I used to make a fuzz called the 3.14, and it was my modern consistent version of Big Muff Pi, because Big Muffs are very inconsistent pedals, and you find one that sounds great, 9 that sound okay, one that's garbage, and the one that sounded great on Tuesday may not sound great on Wednesday. So I made a newer, consistent version that gave the sound I wanted every time. And due to economic factors beyond my control, I could no longer make them. And I sold the last one I had to a rock star who was going to use it on TV, and I thought maybe I'd make some money off that and be able to resume making it. And whatever. I learned the hard way not to chase fame and fortune. But anyway, I've been wanting to get another good fuzz face, and I can't afford the ones I used to make on eBay. I was looking at the Keeley. He's got one, the dark side pedal, where he's got his version of a good fuzz on one side, and then he's got the other side is basically phaser and univibe stuff. And it sounds great, but I don't really want to have them in one pedal. I'd love to buy his univibe pedal and buy his fuzz pedal, because I'd want to have different things in between them. But that particular fuzz he only makes in that one version. I cannot buy that in a standalone thing. So I need to call him and beg him to make me one, or give me give me his secret sauce. I'll roll one um, behind the scenes and just not tell anyone his secret recipe. But I'm not too keen on all-in-one pedals for that reason because it limits your signal flow. RRP says, "What should I get for my next purchase? Origin 20C versus." I'm gonna stop right there. Almost anything is better than the Origin 20C. Back to it. HX Stomp and a pair of Genelec 8010s. Play a Les Paul 59 clone with eights, going for vintage sound. Well, I would honestly say the HX Stomp and the Genelecs, even if you don't end up sound like an old Marshall, you're gonna get some good sounds. But man, the Origin 20, it's got so many problems. It's not a real Marshall circuit. Look at I did 3 videos on the Origin 20, and the third part, lots of Marshall guys argue with because I think it got shared on some forum. So they see the third part out of context of the first 2, and they don't know that I know I'm talking about, and they think I'm just some idiot who's never played a Marshall before. It sounded so bad. And if you look at the circuit, it was designed to sound bad. It was never going to sound good. Um, there are much better sounding Marshall amps than the Origin. I would say if you have a chance, play the HX Stomp, but also check out the AC15 C1 video that I put up yesterday, because that was just a 335 straight in, no pedals. Didn't even use the reverb on the amp. I had a little bit of room ambience after the fact, just because people aren't used to hearing dry mic speakers anymore. But you could do the entire first 2 Led Zeppelin records with that one guitar and that one amp, and it's a amp you can get for under $500. So if you're going for vintage, I would say that over the HX Stomp. But I would say the HX Stomp over the Origin series any any day of the week. Chris Sentmeyer says, thoughts on the Jensen C10R and a 68 custom over the greenback. The C10R is okay. The best speaker on the market for that, in my opinion, is the Warehouse G10C, which is a 10-inch version of the Jensen C12N. And that is just a phenomenal speaker with a Princeton or any Fender amp. That's what I love in a 2 of those in a Vibrolux, and I'd be over the moon. But the Jensen C10R is a good speaker. It's one of the few modern Jensens that I can say that about. Certainly not the C12Ks. But the Greenback is a good sounding speaker. It's what was in that Vox demo yesterday, but it's not a very Fendery speaker. And a single Greenback is very dependent on the cabinet it's in. And that Vox cab is bigger than a Princeton cab. I'm not sure. Plus, the 10-inch Greenback doesn't really sound like a Greenback. It's nominally a Greenback, but it's really small. Why is it every time I take a 4 or 5 minute intermission, people think I'm pooping? I tell you, if I'm going to take we'll be talking about 15, 20-minute intermission. No, I go and get more coffee. I step it on the cigarette porch, and I come back and I'm a little more sane because I get antsy. Question: are panpipes more soothing than a flute? There are questions in this world, Coldacre, that no one can answer except Zamfir. And I think he's no longer with us. Oh, darn. Dr. Paul says, I replaced broken 4700 picofarad bright cap in my Plexi with a poly Mallory. Should I have used a decent ceramic or a cheap one like the original? Those old ceramic disc caps have a sound, um, and they can be a little bit microphonic, which can be a good part of the sound, but that's very subjective. If you got a 4.7 nanofarad Mallory, circuit-wise, it's the same, but what you're not getting is the distortion characteristics, the temperature variation, due to the that interacts with that, and the potential for slightly beneficial in most people's experience, microphonics that the old caps give you. So if a Lemco will sound different than a Mallory 150. But that is subjective. You may prefer the Mallory 150. Um, put it this way: if I were trying to decide what value bright cap to use in a Plexi, I would not order a whole bunch of $50 Lemcos from the '60s. I would, if those values existed in 75 cent $1 150 M's or $1.75 silver micas, to narrow down the cap value I wanted, I use the cheapest thing possible. Then if I knew that, hey, I really want 4,700 picofarad, or I really wanted 250 picofarad, then I might experiment with different materials of that same value. You won't always hear a difference. Sometimes you'll hear a difference and you won't like it, and sometimes you'll hear a difference that's totally counterintuitive to you. But it's your amp. As long as you like it, it's correct. Haggadah says, "Hey Lyle, hope you are well. I am. I hope you are as well. I was wondering on how to tame hiss on a Supersonic 22. I know they are not Fender's best design. That is true. I got one from a friend that hated all the hiss and hum for $430. Thank you." Um, There's not any affordable way to make that amp quiet. You'd have to have a guy like me go in there and cut a whole bunch of traces and run a whole bunch of shielded wires places. And then if it's a guy who's not quite like me but says he is, you might end up with a new series of problems than the ones you have now. I'm sorry that your friend did that to you. The Supersonic series is not a very good amp. The 22 is particularly hissy. The 60 is not good at all either. You can get someone to completely bypass the effects loop. That helps a lot because the effects loop in those amps is a crazy bad, no good, awful idea. But in general, sometimes in this life, you've got to. Thanks, retread on the marker there. Sometimes it's best to say this was a bad purchase. Rather than throw good money after bad, I'm just going to donate this to a school or something and then go buy something else. Sometimes that's really the best thing to do. Like that amp I held up earlier where there's just a clusterfuck inside. I'm not fixing that. I don't want my name associated with that. I don't want to be responsible for saying, well, it worked and then it broke again and you must not have gotten it, blah, blah, blah. I just don't get second guessed on stuff like that. Not everything can be fixed or not feasibly. In the case of the Supersonic, just like this thing, the answer to fixing it is to gut it and have someone put an amp in there instead. David Morris says he finds it helpful and even inspiring listening to me as I think my way through troubleshooting issues. Thank you very much. That means a lot to me, David. I appreciate that. Jake Day says amps built for easy service versus amps built to not need as regular service. Well, I've seen people make the argument about things like cars and matchless. Well, yeah, they're really hard to service, but you're not supposed to need to service them. Everything fails. Everything in this life is impermanent. Nothing is to be trusted. Uh, things in amplifiers, especially, are prone to failure. They have, pots have life cycles. Electrolytic capacitors have life cycles. Switches have life cycles. But everything else is subjected to heat, humidity, unknown operating conditions. The classic amps all the fenders from, say, let's say 55 through 81, all the great period of Marshalls up to about 72. And then again through about 73 really is as long as the tech knows how to work on a PCB. All these apps were designed to be serviced. Some of them are easier to service than others. I'd much rather work on a 68 Marshall than a 78 Marshall. I'd much rather work on a 60s or 70s Princeton than having to do a simple repair on a current one where I've got to pull the board. But even a Vox is fairly easy to work on compared to a matchless because it was just each component goes into the little tag board. It's not wrapped 18 times along with three other leads. So I think amps like Car and Matchless are impressively built if you're just building it to have a picture of it in a magazine somewhere. I don't think that they're doing their owners any real favor because mil spec is not multiple wraps. Mil spec is a 270-degree bend max. That's not even a full loop. Anything beyond mil spec, and that's Dr. Z, that's Matchless, that's a whole bunch, is showing that you don't really know what the benefit of the construction method you're purporting to use is, and you're passing that off to the owner as a deferred, much larger than necessary expense. The thing that would normally take me 15 minutes to fix now takes me an hour, and I have to charge you, the owner, for that. And it's all because the guy thought, well, if 270 degrees is fine, wrapping it four times is four times better, right? No, no. Ask NASA. Ask the military. They have these soldering standards, field tested soldering standards for a reason. Now, not everything I do is true NASA spec because I don't need to. My stuff is not going into orbit. I don't need to have every component fully supported along its length against the board, and then the leads going up to turrets. But where it attaches to the turret or to the eyelet, that's where I do the mil spec. I could do it full NASA spec, but you couldn't afford to buy one. Oh my God, I'm still paying off the hammer I bought from those guys. Hey, Tube Workshop, I still need to talk to you about your master volume with the uh, the loudness compensation. Sorry, this a lot of stuff going on right now. I've been meaning to get in touch with you about that. Sorry about being delayed. I didn't mean to. Gordon Acton says, Merry Christmas and thank you for sharing your knowledge and skills. Thank you very much. My furnace quit and I'm using supplemental heat. I'm sorry to hear that. It's a tough week for a lot of us. I have some amps in a room that is now 38 degrees. Will this harm the amps? No, not at all. As I said, though, earlier in this stream on the same subject, if they're in a cold room and then you bring them into a warm room, especially a warm room that has any humidity, it's possible that the cold surfaces, the metal and glass surfaces of the amp will develop condensation. So don't bring them into the warm room by the fire and turn them on. But you can bring them from the very cold room to a warm room, let them set, 24 hours, at which point power them on, they'll be fine. TJ Fulton says, should I sell my Vox AC4 hand wired? Yes, if you can find someone who has the money whom you dislike. Those are terrible amps, and I'm sorry to say that, but they are. Vanguard asks, is there any point turning an Ampex 620 PA into a guitar amp with a good speaker cab? No, not really. You'd spend as much more money converting that into an amp than you would just buying a better sounding amp to begin with. Unless you just want to say, I did it, in which case it becomes a hobby rather than is this a good idea thing. Will Votrain says, hi, Lyle. Hi, Will. Any opinions on the more recent Marshall hand-wired reissues? I have a 2245 which is the ATM 45 tremolo head. That sounds great. Wondering if you think the build quality is there. Thanks. I'm not sure because I've only had two of the hand wired reissues, and I've had quite a few of the regular reissues. I've only had the 100 and the 50, the 59 and the 87. And on each of them, the new hand-wired Marshall had a bad transformer. And one of them was I don't remember which was which. One was a bad power transformer, one was a bad output transformer. And they were brought to me. They were still in warranty. And I said, well, that's what's wrong with this, because it was brought into the local store where he bought them, and they were brought back for not making sound or making weird sound. And I looked at them and I said, you have two options. I can return this to the store and they can ship this off to their Marshall authorized service center. More on that in a moment. I got to remember where the camera is. And they will put a brand new transformer in it that's exactly as what you have here that failed. Or I can put in a higher quality transformer. I'll have to charge you for it. It won't be a warranty repair, but you'll have they used a crappy transformer. I can put a good one in, but that's it. Either I put a good one in or you get another crappy one in for free from someone else, and that's a roll of the dice. Both owners chose to have me void their warranty and put in good sounding transformers. At that time I think I used classic tones. And I don't know whether your model has the same poor transformer as the 87 and 59 handwires that I had in did. And I don't know whether maybe they just had a bad run and they have been corrected, or whether Marshall has since chosen another transformer vendor, because I'm not privy to all their decisions. A note on the authorized service center thing, because I get asked that a lot. And one guy who was briefly just shit posting everywhere on my channel until I banned him because he was just really an unpleasant person, was saying, well, why should anyone listen to you? You're not even authorized service center for Mesa, blah, blah, blah. That's blah, 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 blah. You're not qualified. I was asked to be authorized. I've been asked to be authorized for a lot of companies. I generally decline because I don't like to deal with the paperwork. I don't like to have to justify to someone in another state all my decisions, and I don't want to wait 90-day billing cycles. I have enough work without their particular teats. But that's between you and me. I don't put that in a standalone video. But I've been contacted by a lot of companies to do a warranty repair in this area, and I've told many of the smaller companies I'd be glad to. If you have a customer in this area, I'll take care of them. We'll work it out. No big deal. But Mesa, Fender, Marshall, it's a lot of bureaucracy there, and you got to justify what you do, and this is a lot of paperwork, and man, it just takes a long time to get paid, and that's I have enough problems in my life without 90-day billing cycles. All right. TJ says, looking for a replacement faceplate for a Baseman 10. Did you know the chassis on these is approximately 2-inch wider than blackface? Yeah, the Baseman 10 is kind of a redhead stepchild of Fender's 70s stuff. It's a good but not inspiring amp. That's the one that has that stage transformer instead of a phase inverter, etc. And what's the best way to put it? I would never recommend that someone buy one. If you have one, it can be made into a better amp, or it can be what it is. But it's an unusual thing, and there's a reason it didn't last in the model line very long. Kind of the same answer, Lawrence Cash, AK, for your Baseman 70 head. But that one can be made more into a real Baseman than the Baseman 10. On that note, my back teeth are floating. I think we're going to take another break. I'm gonna go a little bit longer this time. We're at 2:22, and we usually go about 2.5. Let's go 3 hours, but we're gonna do another, oh, 5-ish minute intermission. Let me get some more coffee, etcetera, and we will be back. So let me hit this button. All right. Well, it's getting a lot warmer out there. Went outside without a hat, without gloves, and thank you, Richard Namagatsu there. And I did not die. Yesterday, I went outside and all my nose hairs broke off. They just froze. Just little nose sickles fell out. It was awful. I don't recommend it to anyone. Don't recommend this weather to anyone. You can go back to the north where it belongs. David Mara says he has a newish Blues Junior 4 as I play in a back bedroom that's quiet. The underlying bass level noise is quite noticeable. Do all tube amps have similar issues with noise? Um, no, the Blues Junior in particular is real susceptible to noise being injected from the blue primary to the ribbon cable right next to it. Look up on my blues and hot rods playlist. Some fixes I published for that. It's a matter of just moving some wires carefully using a chopstick or something, and you can do that yourself. That will make the hum go down a lot. In most blues juniors, if you still have hum, you may have mismatched output tubes, which is also very common. Martin Reed says, "I've only seen you work on one Soldano. How good are pre-BAD amps? They're quite good. The old Soldanos are really well built. I think that's one of the reasons you only see me work on one. There's just not a lot out there, and the ones that are out there tend to hold up pretty darn well. They're well built, and they are designed to be serviced." Clyde Broadway asks, "Any preamps you really like a standalone thing like the Dream, the UA stuff that I was demoing a couple weeks ago?" I thought both the Dream and the Ruby were good and usable, and you could make music with them, but they didn't sound like a real Fender, and they didn't sound like a real Vox, but they were good things. I'm skipping some stuff just so we can get caught up. Best 100-watt Dumble clone kit. I don't know, Derek Sittler. I don't keep up with the kits. I'm sure there are good ones and horrible ones. Um, I think if you're gonna build a 100-watt Dumble, this may be this may come across as snobbery, but I think there are things that you should have kits for, and there are things that if you know how to do it, if you're gonna have a chance of doing it at all right, you don't need a kit for it. It's nice if there's a chassis that will work for the circuit that you wanna do, and the faceplates maybe even. But, um, uh, I think a 100-watt Dumble, that's a situation where a tech would be flexing a little bit. I don't think a kit's the best starting point for that. Victor Beebe says, "What do you think about amps using preamp tubes for output tubes?" I think it's fine if you want a 1-watt amp, but I don't see the point of a 1-watt amp myself. Eric Filsinger says the Basement 70 is ultra linear and can't be blackface as far as I know. Yeah, you can, but you've got to re- rethink and restructure the filtering and add a choke and stuff. Oh, great Jabba. Thanks for so much for that. Ho, 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 ho. I'm not that fat. Thanks, man. Should I sell my AC4 hand wired or send you the small chassis? You should sell it. Don't send it for me. Uh, um, there's not much I can do for those. This is, and what I could do would cost more than the amp's worth. I'm sorry. Rafael Sodre from Brazil, now living in Australia for 4 years now. I do. I remember. Thank you very much. Is it still holding up well for you? And I hope that one had to the 240 setting. Thank you, Christopher Sambuca was asking about the version of optimized deluxe reverb. I did another one a few years ago. It's up on the channel. It's called the 6v6 Classic, and it's nothing earth shattering. It's just a very good sounding. Making one new that sounded like one would sound in 64, 65, with a few little additional features like a mid spot. Richard Namagitsu says, "Your first question to a new client should be, have you seen my show?" Well, it's easy to get big headed about this if you focus on this. So in the real world, I am a very small fish in a very small sea. Even the giants in our field, the Rick Beatos and stuff. 3 million subscribers is an awful lot, and his stuff is much more general interest than mine. But there are people out there with doing nothing but putting up videos of cats that have more than 3 million subscribers. So the internet is a strange place, and you should only give it as much credence as it deserves. Um, that said, it is nice when an app comes in and they know who they chose me specifically. Yeah, I got a AC30 hand wired in. I picked it up day before yesterday, and the guy drove all the way from Alabama specifically for me to work on it. And I'm going to give him a call right after Christmas and see what he needs done on that thing. I take that very seriously, and it's both an honor for me and a sign that I'm doing something right. But I can't let the YouTube thing get to my head. I enjoy these chats with you guys because it gives me a sense of who's watching, and I tend to like you guys, except for you, and you know who you are. Yeah, Lawrence, life is too short for Karens. Good day, Brad. I'm glad you made it, man. I'll stop doing my Australian. I was in a play once in college where I had to do an Australian accent, and it took about 3 weeks. And then, 30 minutes before showtime, I had to go into it because it's not something you can slip in and out of, or at least I can't. It's the same thing with my in-laws who are Midwestern. Everything I do when I speak is very relaxed. It's my tongue is low, everything's in the back of my mouth, everything's very relaxed, and everyone up there is very in their nose, and everything's up there, and in Australia is back at the nasal cavities, and the thing is when you do accents, I've been trying to brush up my French before our trip in March, and there's a big difference between working on an accent versus and doing an impression of the person whose accent you're hearing. And so many of the French speakers who have videos and audio things for me to listen to are either women or they have very much higher voices where it's all very high register and very front top of the mouth, very up here, not relaxed. And it's very hard because I need to find French for baritones. And I'm sure there are many Australians who have voices more like mine. But the vocal coach I had for that play was all up here, mate. Everything was up here. Yeah, I went a little cockney on that because it really needs practice. I used to do theater. I can do this stuff, but I'm not gonna uh, do a video as an Australian because I have a little bit of dignity and have actual Australians watching this shit. If I could do a voice for any of these, I would be David Attenborough for these. I think that would be awesome. Parallel loops are dumb. They are in most cases. Bobby Ivanov says, "What are your recommendation for a new boutique Vox AC1530? Don't want to buy an amp and have a tech upgrade it. Just buy straight up. Love your channel. Thank you very much. Informative, entertaining, and humble." That's right, man. I am the best at being humble. No one's more humble than I am. Welcome to my internet. That's how I feel watching other videos out there. Um, you know, I'm gonna be making the Excalibur 15, which is gonna be about as good as it's possible to get in that thing. But that AC15 yesterday that you heard, yeah, on the normal channel, I jumpered one resistor. That's really simple. On the top boost channel, I did change the tone stack, but even in stock form, it's a really good at sounding amp. Many of the boutique amps sound pretty much the same as that. Some of them are hummier and hissier. I think it's really easy to get caught up in the wrong details. Um, good player, good guitar, straight in, good amp, and the custom, the C1 is a good amp. The thing that people don't have is step 1, good player, and I'm not attacking you. I'm not as good as Steve. You know, um, there's all these channels out there, and I'm down at the nichiest of niches in guitar YouTube world, but I'm aware of the guys, Beato or let's just say Rhett Schull. He's a really good player, and so he could play a Squire into a Fender Tone Master Deluxe Reverb and sound better than I do, and he certainly has a more professional studio than I do. So his recordings come across better, and he masters and EQs and puts on effects because he's selling a performance, not this is what an amp sounds like. Um, so and I in my playing videos, I show aspects of what a player might find in an amp. I'm not trying to do a performance. I'm trying to say, how does it do if I play really soft? How does it do if I really dig in? How does it do if I snap the string? And so it doesn't really sound great unless you're listening for the same things I'm listening for. And I think in my experience, the real players, uh, Steve Selvage, Joe Restivo, and I'm sure Rhett Schull, if he's looking for an amp video, would want to know those things rather than hear how someone else plays it because it won't sound the same when he plays it. But hey, this is how it reacts if I really dig into the string. This is how it reacts if I slam the strings. This is how it reacts if I play a complex chord. This is what it is if I just do a double stop. That's what they're looking for. So I'm trying to give the pro player all the bits of the recipe that they can cook with. But as far as making it sound pretty on here, once you have a really great player, you're ahead of the game, and so it's really hard to know when an amp is really great or not. Um, I guess I'm talking myself in circles because it's easy to just free associate on this, but I do think that the custom series is way underrated. Brand recommendation for replacement transformers and choke for a Brown Bandmaster. That's Edved796. Well, all 3 replacements for a Bandmaster? That's rare to need all 3, but, I'm sure Hammond's fine. Habor might or might not have those in stock. They're fine. Mercury is great. I'm not sure whether Mercury is a good choice for a one-off. I get dealer pricing on that stuff. So if I were doing the work, I would pass on a much lower price on the transformers. But I would also say, hey, for this model, there's nothing wrong with using the Hammond because there's nothing especially special about those transformers. Mercury can be great if it's like, okay, in June of '68, Marshall used a different transformer than they used in August than they used in January. And we've got a clone of that. Whereas other companies just have, you want the 50-watt Marshall or the 100-watt Marshall? So, Hammond's kind of in between the two, and Hammond does have various transformers for various models of Fender. If they have the correct ones for your Bandmaster, that'd probably be the best price performance combination. Richard Namamitsu, no, sorry, Nagamitsu. No, no one outside of guitar amps and vintage radios are using tubes at all. So there's no reason for anyone else to make 12AX7s or EL84s. They're just for tube enthusiasts. That's musical instruments and hi-fi. That's pretty much it. It's a small market. Sam DeFranco Music says, do you have a recommendation for an effective solder smoke remover? It's called a boffer, Boffer, but I don't have a recommendation. I would check on DigiKey or Parts Express, or just you know Google it. It's a Boffer. I don't know what the best ones are. What Jason Daniels Stone says, what do you think about people saying 70 to 85% of the guitar sound for high gain comes from the speaker? What percentage do you think the pickups, amplifier, and speaker make? It's all these things. There's no way to say it's precisely this percentage of this or that. The wrong speaker can ruin it if everything else is right. But the same can be said for any part of that change. You can have the best speaker, pickups, amplifier, and amp in the world, and then have an inept player, and it just sounds like a loud noise. Same thing for if you have the wrong pick or bad pickups. Um, Everything that you are doing with the guitar is to make an output transformer make a particular set of waveforms on the other side, and all that gets translated by a speaker. And that speaker has to live in an acoustic space and within a cabinet attached to a baffle with some volume and dimensions. So you can have the right speaker in the wrong cab. You can have the right cab with the wrong speaker. You've got to learn all the pieces and how they fit together and how they fit together for you. So I don't think the guitar sound is 80% of this. I don't think the speaker is 80%, but every bit of it's just as important. I know that's almost a non-answer, but there's probably a better way I could have said that, but I'll just have to stay with that for now. Brad says Michelle refused to bring me coffee. I think I need a new wife. You just got her. She should be under warranty. If Michelle, if you see that, remember he's under warranty too. Thank you, G Town Blues. Appreciate that. Merry Christmas to you and yours as well. And same to Mylon. Mylon also says, what would you say is the best combo amp, not limited to any price point? Well, I mean, that depends on what your playing style is. And whether you need it to be an amplifier, as in that is making a very loud sound for even up to very loud stages, or whether you need it to be a tone generator, in which case it just needs to be loud enough to, maybe to hang with an acoustic drummer, and then in larger venues it would be mic'd. Um, AC30s are one of the ones I love. They're not as utterly reliable as a Fender, so maybe the Fender um, is the winner there, but is the winner the Super Reverb, the Vibrolux Reverb, or the Deluxe Reverb? All three of which are iconic for good reasons. I like the sound of the Vibrolux and the Super better than the Deluxe. I love the Deluxe. Um, Super Reverb might be their best sounding clean amp ever. Fender's best sounding clean amp ever, but someone else will disagree with that because it gets subjective. Meanwhile, someone's got a high watt DR 504 or 103 combo and they love it, love it, love it. And they're not wrong. I can say that whatever the best combo amp in the world is, it does not say Mesa anywhere on it. Stout Coffee asks, is a fixed bias amp considered to be a cool biased amp? My PV Butcher and BTM have fixed biases. No, you can bias a fixed bias amp anywhere within the range that you choose, but you should choose typically 50 to 70%. People would call 50% cool, 70% warm, and 60% in the middle. You can go colder than that, and your PV Butcher and VTM probably are closer to about 30%, and Mason might be as low as 12%. You certainly don't want to go over 75%, but there are a lot of variation in. There's a safe range for the bias to be, and within that range, there are different tonal attributes, but that would really be a really long video in itself. Tommy Mitchell, Merry Christmas Eve to you too. I'm going to start to sum up some of these things. I've tried to read the entire questions so people watching later can understand what I'm answering, but I'm going to have to speed up a little bit here. A 7025, and a 12AX7 are the same tube. A 7025 is just a 12AX7 that's been rated for low noise. But on your twins, where it says to use a 12AT7, use a 12AT7, not an AX. Those are very different tubes. A 12AX7 is a voltage driver. A 12AT is a current driver. The answer is longer than that, but from a musician's point of view, that's really all you need to know. AT7 is providing a lot of current. AX is providing voltage. They're not interchangeable. Won't blow up, but trust me, keep the AT7s where they are, but you can use 12AX7s any place except 7025. Is building amp by numbers sorcery, or is it worth looking into? Well, there's no sorcery if you're building an amp by numbers. That's just connecting the dots, and you may or may not get uh, uh, good results. Jake Day says Screddy is the place for Floyd fuzz. Well, my 3.14 was much better and better than Analog Man, but I can't make it anymore. So actually, I could. I could make a one-off in a custom enclosure. Maybe I will. But there's nothing wrong with Analog Man. There's nothing wrong with Screddy. They're fine if you're not me. And yeah, I say some of this with a grain of salt and a little self-mocking humor. But seriously, that was a damn good pedal, the 3.14. There's a reason I can't afford to get one from Reverb anymore. G-Town Blues has a December 63 deluxe amp without reverb. My opinion on it. Thanks. Phenomenal amp. Hold on to it. It's going to be worth tons so much. It's a really good amp, and there's a world of reverb pedals out there should you want it. It's got a very different sound than the reverb model, but there's nothing wrong with that. Keeley now makes the Moon Fuzz, the one from the Dark Side pedal. Well, I spoke to my contact at Keeley, and he said they're slightly different, but the Moon does sound good. But the Moon has got more lows than the one that in the Dark Side, which they were very proud of, and that's exactly what I didn't want. I thought the Dark Side one sounded more like what I wanted. Hey, Hal. Pardon me. Coffee's catching up. Hey, Hal. AC 15 vid was killer. Thanks, man. It shows that great tone can be made with something that doesn't cost a ton. That's true. I mean, it was an inexpensive amp. He got it used. I did relatively minor things to it. Not reinventing the wheel, just aligning the tires really well. And then he took it on the racetrack. Rich Nagamitsu says, I love the JVM shows. Never really considered that app, but it sounds great in the video. More on that in a second. After I get an AC15, after seeing yesterday's show with Steve. The AC15 is even the little custom is just a really good amp. I think that the custom is there's a reason it's in my Amps Under 500 video and my Amps Under 1,000 video. And a brand new one with blues would be in the amps over under 2,000 video, but with a lot of change left over. It's a really good amp. The JVM is funny. I think it's a good amp for what it does. It's a notch up from the DSL 40 and the DSL 100, but similar in a lot of ways. But the owner of that amp called me to ask if his was normal after he picked it up because he had so much white noise in the background on the high gain channels. Because he was just listening to the white noise without playing, and it seemed really high to him. And it is in those amps. There's a lot of but it's so behind the level of what you play that in context, what you play is so much louder than the white noise that most people are fine with it, or people sell all kinds of pedals to gate on stage or in a recording studio. You just automate your mutes and stuff. But he thought that the amp that the white noise was something else was wrong. And I had to say, I'm sorry to tell you that your amp is acting completely healthy. They all will do that. Some high gain amps are even noisier. There are a few that are quieter, but they cost 3 times as much. So people don't always have the most realistic expectations, especially if they're coming from the digital modeling world, where you can have high gain without all the white noise or much less. Thanks, Colby Jack. I have hugged my pet today, but I have not clicked the like today. But I welcome anyone else to do so. Clyde Broadway. Mesa cabs are fine. They're extremely heavy. Um, um, but um, you know, they're they're fine, but overpriced because people want that logo. And there are better cabs or equivalent cabs for less money. Yeah, 270 degrees, gringo. I scrolled again. I touched the scroll thing and it zapped down to the bottom. Let me get where I was. Any recommendation for a current production or vintage EF86? Tree of Life says. Um, about a year ago, I did a video comparing new production and various new old stock EF86s, and there was a lot of variation. I was not impressed with Electro Harmonics or JJ. Current ones, if I had to choose one, I think the JJ might get the nod. But also had a lot of variation in the old ones. Um, I would say I think we went with a Tungsram, an old Tungsram in that comparison. Watch that video because everything was fresh in my mind when I filmed it, and now I'm sitting here a year later. Yeah, Joe Restivo is incredible harmonic boy. Your name is hard to say. Um, Loudness compensated master volume. That's right, Tube Workshop. I'm going to be looking you up and get in touch with you. B. Ambule says, Merry Christmas. Thanks. Right back at you. Thinking of starting a new amp project, something with a couple of 6v6s or EL84s, Fender amount of gain stages. Any suggestions? Um, well, that's a lot of classic amps with that set of tubes. Um, um, Without knowing what your tastes are, I can't steer you any farther anywhere other than that. You can do an awful lot of stuff with either pair of output tubes. David S. I've not seen that Plexi video Rhett's got out. No, a Plexi can put out 144, um, um, but they can put out a lot less than that. Um, I don't know if it's peak or RMS without measuring it, but some of those things had insane B pluses and just really pushed the hell out of those 34s. So it's not outside the realm of possibility, though I imagine a lot of that's peak, but a Plexi is often a 120 watt amp versus a 100 watt amp, and there's not an appreciable difference between the two. Um, but anything over 60 watts can get to the point of pain. I saw his title and I knew pretty much what to expect there. Which I don't know. It just I don't mean to shit talk Red. I don't know him. He seems like an upright guy, but didn't he just get a new signature model amp and now he's getting all these other amps? And I don't understand the signature game, the endorsement game. Maybe I'm just slow. Thanks, Iron Jar Jar. He says, "Thanks for this year. Thank you. I'm just a mixing engineer. No one's just a mixing engineer, man. If you got a job doing mixes, you're a creative. But your videos have given me a lot of good tips and info about apps, etc. I really appreciate it. Well, thank you. Hey, Jason Tongs here, guys. All the Australians in the house. Martin Reed, why doesn't Fender employ you as a consultant? I can keep them right in design and help them. They don't have any. They don't care. They don't care about whether the amp's being better or lasting longer. They just need to sell more and make more money at it, and they only have to last as long as their warranty. And if they want to prove me wrong, hire me and I'll design a line of amps that will be so good that they'll only be able to sell one to each person. They won't have to have people keep buying the same damn amp. How many guys out there do you know who own like, and they're on their fourth Blues Junior or their third Hot Rod? From Fender's point of view, that's 8 sales where they could have had two. I didn't see the video with a 140-watt Marshall. So, uh, okay, so I'm just caught up to where I came back or where I went on the break. Curtis Everett, no, I did not know Steve DeCoon. Producer man, chances of my blowing myself up if I try and build my own amp, you're very unlikely to blow yourself up. You're much more likely to fry yourself or severely burn yourself. So if that's any consolation, never start with a big amp. Start with build pedals, get your basic concepts together, get your soldering together, then build a champ. After your champ, build a deluxe. Once you've built a deluxe and it works the first time and everything is reliable, then try something bigger. But make sure that you've built a few pedal kits first and they all work and you understand what you're seeing and why things and figure out the why, not just the what to do, but why you're doing that and why you're doing it that particular way. Fuzz, fun, and coffee cash. Happy holidays. Thank you very much, Lawrence. It's very appreciated. Closer to James Earl Jones. I get I'm told that. I don't think I sound at all like James Earl Jones. I wish I did. That'd be fun at parties. Colby Jack says, "Hello, Lou Woods. Do you have a genius amp tech in Seattle you like?" Well, I'm not Lou Woods, but Colby Jack. My buddy Rick Erickson is up in the Seattle area, and he is cantankerous and jaded and been there and seen it all because he really has. He used to design apps for Roger Fisher at Heart. He does all the stuff for the guys in Pearl Jam, and he's got a lot of other illustrious clients, and he's really good and he knows his shit. So my vote would be for Rick Erickson. Thanks, producer man. Talking about not doing tons of distortion. Yeah, Brad's right there with Rick. Not only does he recommend Rick as well, he gives the address. He's in Edmonds. Okay. And Peter Toms, I didn't know Peter was up there. Peter's also really good. I didn't know he was in Seattle. See, Brad pays more attention than I do. Hey, Graybeard. Thanks very much. Bring it over to Martin Music on Poplar. And I'll take care of your dreaded Blues Junior. I'll be glad to. All right. And Brad with the buffers there. I'm trying to scroll back up to where I was. All right, there we go. I think we're going to need to wind this down pretty quickly. I'm going to try to get, if you'll all stop asking questions, I'm going to try to answer all the questions that have been asked so far and try to be quickly, and then we'll get to the end. Mahalo, Victor Beebe. Mahalo. Sorry, I forgot my Lilo and Stitch. Yeah, the dark side is very different than the moon. I could tell by the sound. I would get rid of the Mesa before it fails, but Jimmy Jams, I can't. What if I'm wrong? So far, every Mesa I've had come in has failed in catastrophic and stupid, unnecessary ways. But maybe you got a great one. Um, Unlike all the other mesas in existence. But yeah, I would ditch it while it's still sellable and get something that can be fixed that's less likely to catch on fire. Have no opinion of a Ibanez TSA 15. Every part of the AC 15 hand wired uses a PCB as far as um, the main board, it looks like a turret board, but all those turrets are mounted on PCB traces, and they are just fine, unlike the older, TV series, the Heritage series, that those were terrible PCBs with terminal, terminal, turret posts that broke off. But yeah, the boards on the, hand wired are PCBs. I have not had the supersonic twin with automatic bias, Richard Rogers, but all the Fender stuff with auto bias is to be avoided if you want to have a pardon me, long-lasting amp. I don't have any experience with the V3 Ampegs, I'm sorry. I have not worked on a Seymour Duncan convertible, though I remember the Jeff Beck ads. I don't have any thoughts on Dr. S amps. If you meant Dr. Z amps, they're quite good, but I don't think they're as good as people. Okay, they're good. Yeah, Dr. Z. I think I'm gonna take a little more time with this because it deserves it. I think Dr. Z makes very good amps. I don't think they make great amps, but they make very good amps. It's just a lot of the amps that they're compared to are kind of crappy, and they tend to have really good players playing them. I don't know if there's a financial transaction there to get them to play them, or whether they just use them on the road and use something else in the studio. Not all Dr. Z's are as sound as good as others. The non-reverb models sound better than the reverb models. The Mark IIs sound better than Mark I's. The heads with reverbs should be avoided because the tank's too close to everything and it hums and buzzes. If you must have a reverb in a Dr. Z, get a Mark II and get a combo where the tank's farther away from everything. Some of their models sound quite good. Some of them have some design flaws. It's not like they're all great or they're all bad. I think they're a very hyped company. They don't use lock washers. The things tend to get loose. I'm not a fan of all these little things, but in comparison to other companies, their flaws are relatively minor. And every time you go and see a Brad Paisley or someone on the road using their stuff, they've got a guy like me on that tour making sure everything works every night. Unless you want to have a guy like me every day, I think there are better apps. But that's if you own one and you love it, you're not wrong. Brad, man, you don't need to give me anything, dude. But thank you. We're just gonna start giving each other the same $20 on YouTube every couple weeks. If you ever do another video again, thanks to 70 Quart Canal. I don't like the Origin Marshalls because they don't sound like Marshalls. They aren't. The circuit is not built like a Marshall. Everything about it is wrong. Um, it is a cosmetic Marshall, and there are so many better things for that same money. That's right. Rick built the Barracuda flanger, and he's still around. And if you think I'm opinionated, talk to Rick sometime. I've never had an apprentice. Anyone who's qualified to work for me, I couldn't afford. Anyone I could afford would not be qualified to work for me. I don't have time to train them. My favorite high gain amp from a repair point of view. That's tough because a lot of them are wretched. Soldano, hands down, Soldano. Yeah, Brad, we can't get rid of the Mesas, but at least our customers could. What would I charge a day to be an amp tech on the road? Well, I would need I would need at least 1,000 a day. At least. So, and there are guys who do this who charge more than I do. But and there are a lot of guys who do it for less, but that's one of the reasons I would not do it unless someone was really paying me that. All right, have we reached the end of the questions? I think we have, and we've been going just over 3 hours and almost 10 minutes. So I'd like to take this time to say thank you all. You've made this a tremendous year for me on the channel, and it has meant a lot to me. And I appreciate your interest. I appreciate the time you spend here on these live chats. I appreciate you watching the videos, even when I go way into the weeds. I try to keep it musician friendly and not get off on too many tangents, but even so, sometimes I'm long-winded, and I appreciate that very much. I hope everyone has a very safe and wonderful holiday season, even those of you crazy Australians suffering through summer. Um, Maybe we'll try to get it again next year, next Saturday, right before the end of the year. And I'm thinking about doing a different video than all the other channels who are doing the best gear of 2022 kind of things and telling you what they think. I think I'm going to put out a video asking for you guys to tell me what you think, and I will read your responses. And if any of you want to get together some maybe 30-second to 1 minute little videos, I could even string them together to do a best gear of 2022, what did you guys think video. So if that's of interest to you and you think you'd like to participate, either write down your thoughts or just send a little quick video. It can just be a little thing with your telephone, whatever, just saying, hey, I got this and I love it because whatever. I don't want to get into the worst gear. I don't care about that. I think the world's got enough negativity. But tell me, and you'll end up telling each other the things that made, the gear that you liked the most this year. And I think that'd be a cool thing because I got the rest of the year to tell you what I think. All right, I'm gonna sign out now if I can remember to do this the right way. All right. Thanks all. See you next time.